The only candle flickered its yellow flame, casting shadows on the walls around the activity room. Klein found the most convenient escape point before surveying his surroundings. He saw the Eye of Wisdom with his deep cheek lines and the plump apothecary. Well, after another comparison, even though he's wearing an iron mask that covers half his face, it's still pretty clear that he was the man I met at Rice Circus who deserves a beating. Klein looked away and waited for the gathering to officially begin. The woman who had an artisan backing her was very hidden among the participants, so he couldn't be sure that she was present before she spoke. After a few minutes, Eye of Wisdom raised his head to look at the mechanical clock on the wall and chuckled. There's a lot of people here today. Let's begin. Before he finished speaking, the plump apothecary rushed to speak. I need a beyonder creature for an experiment. It's best if it's an animal, and it's best if it's already restrained and one that's not too dangerous. A beast-type beyonder creature? Klein was slightly moved. He remembered what the apothecary had said in the circus theater and that he was apparently able to read the thoughts of beasts. He's just an apothecary, yet he possesses such an ability and is even looking to purchase a beast-type beyonder creature. After I sold him the Spring of Elves Marrow crystal, he should have gathered the ingredients and advanced to the next sequence. In other words, the sequence after apothecary has something to do directing wild beasts. Klein made a deduction based on the information he knew. At this moment, someone responded to the apothecary with a sneer. Who would keep a beyonder creature by their side? It's dangerous and easily discovered. Wouldn't it be easier and more concealed to kill them to obtain its beyonder ingredients? The apothecary was a person who refused to lose in a spar of words, so he immediately sneered. What a foolish thought. You can't guarantee that the beyonder ingredient on a beyonder creature is exactly what you need and that you can definitely sell it. You might as well tame it and direct it to be your helper, increasing your strength several-fold. As he spoke, his voice gradually grew softer. He felt as if he had revealed some important secret. Damn it! Why can't I control this mouth of mine? The apothecary figuratively smacked himself in the heart. As expected, Klein nodded indiscernibly. Without a doubt, the apothecary's request wasn't met. Most of the participants here were low-sequence beyonders, and their statuses in Backland weren't very prominent. With the need for them to be relatively alert, to the point of barely maintaining it, so how was it possible for them to extravagantly rear a beyonder creature? Furthermore, more importantly, there was the fact that wild beyonder creatures were usually hostile to humans. Any encounter would usually lead to one dead, so if one wanted to capture them alive, they would need to have a sufficiently strong team or be strong enough to overwhelm the enemy. Of course, this didn't exclude particular beyonders who possessed special abilities that were suitable for such situations. After a bout of disappointment, the apothecary coughed lightly and said, I've brought quite a few bottles of medicine. All of you know the effects. If you want them, you can speak up when the gathering is almost over. The few medicines to treat wounds, go berserk and increase one's ability in that aspect? Klein silently lampooned. He chuckled and provided a suggestion. You can purchase a Sequence 9 formula, find the corresponding beyonder ingredients, and then concoct the potion to feed the animal you fancy. This way, you will have a Sequence 9 beyonder creature, and you can also continuously advance it with the subsequent potions. Of course, that's built on the premise that you are rich enough and can deal with the defective ones that lose control. The apothecary was stunned for a few seconds. After a while, he said, How extravagant. Just saving up money and finding the beyonder ingredients for myself is difficult enough for me. It's also a high probability event for an animal to lose control after they consume potions. It will take me several times before I succeed. Someone who can do this must have a mine or owns a bank. Our tarot club's Miss Justice likely rears a beyonder creature. Klein suddenly felt sorry for the apothecary. If one wanted to disregard it for the sole purpose of earning money, apothecaries were the easiest among the low-sequence beyonders to amass large amounts of wealth. The problem was that they were also easily targeted by the official beyonders. After a few more deals or failed transactions, Klein heard a voice that was deliberately suppressed. I only brought one beyonder weapon this time. They are 50 bullets with different effects. 20 of them are engraved with the Sun Domain's labels and symbols, forming a complete charm. They can be used to purify ghost-related monsters. They cause more damage to wraiths and shadows, so they are called purifying bullets. There are another 20 bullets which are meant for corrupted creatures, known as demon hunting bullets. The other 10 are bullets that counter evil-type monsters, known as exorcism bullets. Their effects can be maintained for 18 months or more. 50 bullets for £500 or the Barbarian Potion formula. It will come with a revolver with the matching caliber. They did make related bullets according to my suggestions from last time. From the looks of it, they're more complicated than ordinary Beyonder weapons. It took them so long only to make a set. Klein didn't give the others a chance and directly said, I have the Barbarian Potion formula. At this moment, a rather tall man offered a price. £550. In this day and age, a revolver was the most convenient Beyonder weapon to use and carry. The well-hidden lady's voice was filled with unquenchable joy as she said, Sir, I'm sorry. I have a preference for the Barbarian formula. £600. The man raised the offer again. No, this is not about money. The woman with an artisan backing her glanced at Klein. Deal. But please pass the formula to old Mr. Eye of Wisdom for his notarization. Phew, it's a good thing that I got the Dark Emperor card. Otherwise, if I met someone who can raise the price so ruthlessly, I definitely would have lost a lot of money today. Klein rolled up his robe, took out the Barbarian formula which he had long written from his inner pocket and opened it to take a look. Sequence 8 Barbarian. Main ingredients: Grass of Madness, Core Horn Crystal of a Land Rhinoceros. Supplementary ingredients: 1 deep-grained walnut, 1 fragrance hornet grass, 10 milliliters of the extract obtained from soaking poplar bark, 100 milliliters of liquor. After confirming that it was correct, Klein folded the paper and handed it to the attendant. Just like before, Eye of Wisdom took out the ring that was inlaid with many small diamonds. He mimicked the Beyonder powers of a notary and confirmed that the formula was true. Hearing this old man declare that the formula is valid, the woman with the artisan backing her heaved a sigh of relief and took out a square iron box the size of a palm. After the attendant passed the formula to her, she eagerly rolled it open and read it a few times, as if she wanted to memorize it directly. As for Klein, he snapped open the box and looked at it. There were 3 piles of bullets inside the metal box. One pile had a faint golden luster as though they had just been fished out of hot water. The other was entirely silver and covered with patterns, cold yet sacred. The pile with the fewest bullets suffused a golden sheen amidst the brass color. He could vaguely see several labels and symbols engraved on it. As it's authentic, Klein had the ability to appraise the bullets in the field of mysticism. He snapped the lid shut and stored the item in the pocket under his robe. As for the free revolver, it was nothing special. The body of the gun was a deeper brass color, and the handle was made out of walnut wood. Since his underarm holster had also been lost back when he encountered the police inspection, Klein had to attach the revolver to his waist and cover it with his clothes. After finishing the transaction, he looked around the activity room and deliberately raised his voice. I need strong purifying items like Sun Holy Water and Sun Sacred Emblem. I can buy it in gold or I can use formulas as a barter like the sequence after Barbarian, Briber. Of course, if there are any questions regarding the mysticism and the Beyonder world that requires answering, I can also give it a try, but I can't guarantee that I can answer it. As the apothecary listened, he widened his eyes. He had a feeling that this was that lucky lad. However, he had just become a Beyonder not long ago, so how could he have obtained so many valuable things? The more he thought about it, the more he gnashed his teeth, feeling as if he had made the wrong choice back then. Luck was the most important thing. The woman who had bought the Barbarian formula couldn't control herself and almost said in her original voice, I don't have anything you need, but I can pay you in cash. £800. Klein swallowed the word deal that he nearly said. He thought for a moment before chuckling. I'm only accepting bartering for the time being. I will most likely be back for the next gathering. You can seek out the relevant items in advance. For the time being. The lady ruminated over the word and nodded slowly. All right. After that, no one else said anything, and Klein's needs were also not met. In Backlund, in the Lone Kingdom, the worshippers of the eternal blazing sun could be considered heretics, so few of such items circulated beyond official channels. Klein was slightly disappointed, but he wasn't too concerned. He had an alternative plan. He clearly remembered that Miss Sayo had once sought out a Beyonder believer of the eternal blazing sun for purification. And the lady who craved the Briber formula would definitely be actively looking for his desired items. Klein stopped talking and listened to the subsequent exchanges. When the gathering was coming to an end, An average-built participant with no special characteristics pinched the iron mask on his face and said with a deep baritone voice, "I need an adult black widow spider silk gland." An adult black widow spider silk gland? Sounds familiar. I seem to have heard of it somewhere. Klein frowned slightly. Without using divination, he tried hard to recall where. Suddenly he remembered the source of the familiar feeling. It was one of the main ingredients for the demoness of pleasure. Pleasure was sequence 6 of the demoness pathway. Klein had obtained its complete formula back when he channeled Madame Sharon's spirit. Although it was usually difficult to recall the exact details, and he had to rely on the help of dream divination to recall the memory, just hearing the main ingredient was enough to give him a sense of familiarity and make him form connections. He couldn't help but glance over at the buyer, confirming that he was male in terms of skin color, figure, voice, and unmasked facial features. The sequence prior to demoness of pleasure is witch. Regardless of their gender, as long as they pass that, they would all become women. This person clearly isn't one. He hasn't become a witch yet, so why is he purchasing the main ingredient of a demoness of pleasure? Could he be helping someone buy it? Is he the ally of some witch or a loyal subordinate? However, as a rather ancient secret organization, the demoness sect shouldn't be lacking in the corresponding ingredients. With their natural disposition, it would be normal for them to use the beyonder characteristics left behind by former members to concoct the potions. Did the witch behind the buyer lose her connection with the organization? With these thoughts, Klein had the impulse to follow him. However, after careful consideration, he gave up on this idea. Ignoring the question on how he could bypass the precautionary measures of Eye of Wisdom and lock onto the other party's tracks, just the fact that the other party's situation was unknown, and with him not having the time to perform a divination, it was enough for him to choose to follow his heart's wishes. What if there isn't only one witch but a beyonder who's much stronger? Moreover, it's a good thing for witches to advance to demoness of pleasure. The former would cause calamities and harm many innocent people, but once they advance to the latter, their goal would be focused on pleasure. In simple terms, society would be less dangerous. Klein mumbled. An adult black widow spider silk gland was already considered to be relatively expensive and a rare beyonder ingredient. It was just like the thousand-faced hunter's mutated pituitary gland and the characteristic of a human-skinned shadow which Klein needed in order to ascend to sequence 6. It was almost equivalent to the cost of half a house in the capital, so the buyer didn't receive a satisfactory response. To be precise, no one responded. The atmosphere of the gathering fell silent until the plump apothecary started selling the medicine he brought. After the previous trials, he received quite a few repeat customers. In less than 3 minutes, he had sold all the goods he could sell and collected more than £50 in cash. As Eye of Wisdom announced the end of the gathering, each participant left through different passages in a different order and at different intervals. Klein was in the middle, and after he reached a secluded street, he took off his disguise and immediately set off for East Borough, arriving at Black Palm Street on that cold and foul-smelling night. On the way, he had purchased an armpit holster. He entering his rented one-bedroom apartment. Without taking a break, he took out his revolver and opened the metal box containing the beyonder bullets. He then took out 2 purifying bullets, 2 demon-hunting bullets, and 1 exorcism bullet. Then he loaded them one by one into the chamber. Taking a pose, he tested the feeling and whether he could fire normally. Klein inserted the revolver into his armpit and busied himself with other preparations. For example, he checked to see if there was anything unusual about the all-black eye in the iron cigarette case. He also placed Azek's copper whistle in the metal box containing the bullets, and with the help of holy night powder he created a sealed wall of spirituality that stuck to the surface of the box, completing the shielding of the ancient, delicate copper whistle. After confirming the shapes and positions of the 3 charms, Klein headed above the gray fog for divination. Then he put on his cap and went out again. His target was 32 Verdi Street, which was south of the bridge. It was where the thief had found the master key. There might be clues to the apprentice formula or clues to related items there. It was somewhere that Klein had long wanted to explore, but he suspected that the man who died a tragic death had turned into a wraith-like creature. He didn't dare to take action until he bought purifying bullets. A magician never performs unprepared. Before the steam subway, the most economical mode of transport, had stopped running, Klein arrived south of the bridge before transferring to a public carriage and arrived near Verdi Street. It was already late at night and a chilling drizzle filled Backland. There were barely any pedestrians on the street, and the light from the gas lamps was blurred by the liquid on the glass, making everything seem dreamlike. Klein circled the area and observed Unit 32's situation. He walked to its side, climbed to the second floor, and easily entered the target's interior from the balcony door, which clearly couldn't be closed by the thief from before. He didn't bring the master key, fearing that the item would cause an abnormal chain reaction here. The layout of the house was very normal. A corridor that connected the two balconies ran through the entire second floor. There were bedrooms, a bathroom, a solarium, and an activity room lining the sides. With the help of the crimson moonlight shining in from the balcony, Klein saw that all the doors had been opened. All kinds of items were thrown on the ground in disarray. It should be the result from the thief from before. He couldn't take away all the items, so he could only search for the most valuable ones. However, with the master key, there's no need for him to open doors. Klein went through the rooms one by one, looking for things that might be involved with mysticism. After an unknown period of time, a black-gloved Klein arrived at the staircase without any success. Just as he took 2 steps forward, a figure suddenly appeared before him. The figure was pressed against the wall at the corner of the stairs. Its back was facing Klein. Its black hair was so thick that it almost covered its neck. Klein, who had long activated his spirit vision, didn't even have time to observe, for the figure suddenly moved. His neck creaked as he turned his head while his back remained facing the second floor. Amidst the hazy, weak, and illusory crimson illumination, the figure's eyes were bulging out of their sockets, filled with fear. Thud. The 2 eyeballs hit the ground. Bang. The figure's head fell off its neck and hit the wooden staircase. He's long dead. He's without any spirituality glow. Klein watched and judged calmly, as though what had just happened was a farce. He guessed from the details of the man's old black clothes and the number of rooms open on the second floor, and he decided that this was another burglar, one who had visited the house after the previous one. Unfortunately, he wasn't that lucky. Could it be that the master key was actually restraining the danger here, and when it was taken away, pandemonium was set loose? Klein drew his revolver, adjusted the chamber to the firing position, and cocked the revolver. He walked up the stairs to the corpse. He squatted down and examined it briefly, but he couldn't find anything other than the fact that his neck had been twisted. After pondering for a few seconds, Klein straightened his body and carefully went down the stairs. Even though he was standing on a wooden staircase, he didn't make any creaking sounds. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. After walking down the flight of stairs, he reached the ground. In front of him was a corridor that connected the 2 sides. The crimson moonlight shone in, outlining the outline of the balcony. The doors on both sides of the corridor were wide open, revealing a messy scene of scattered items. There was no living room, dining room, or kitchen here. This is the second floor. Klein went down from the second floor, only to return to the second floor. Throughout the entire process, he didn't discover anything out of the ordinary. Klein didn't panic as he slowly turned around. Behind him there was a staircase leading downwards. That is to say, my special ability can only resist the invasion of my Beyonder powers through the use of Beyonder powers such as dreams and spirit channeling, or for me to realize that the environment I'm in does not belong to the real world. I'll still be influenced by hallucinations. Klein took out his matchbox and took out a few matches with his gun-carrying hand. He continued down, throwing a match down every few steps. Once again Klein came to the corner of the stairs and saw the dead body with its head separated from its body. At this moment, a cold wind blew across the back of his neck, causing his hair to stand on end. Pop! Klein snapped his fingers and a red flame soared from behind him, soaring toward the ceiling. Those flames seemed to be a monster that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, but the flames didn't burn anything. Klein was about to turn around and look with his spirit vision when his body suddenly froze, as if he had fallen into a lake frozen in winter. He couldn't help but tremble as his left hand was slowly reaching for his neck as he forcibly suppressed it. At that moment Klein sighed softly. He forced his left hand into his pocket, removed the wall of spirituality and opened the metal box containing the bullets. Next he held Azek's copper whistle, took it out, shook it and threw it into the air above the stairs. In almost an instant he felt the coldness and stiffness in his body disappear. In his spiritual perception, a sinister and cold mass leaped out like a dog fetching a ball as it pounced at Azek's copper whistle. Klein smiled, raised his right hand, aimed at the copper whistle and pulled the trigger. He softly said, "Bye-bye." Bang! The pale gold purifying bullet flew out and accurately hit that cold and indistinct object. A blood-curdling screech sounded out as the golden flames outlined a human's silhouette in midair. Under the bright and warm light, all the coldness and evilness quickly disappeared. Clang! Isaac's copper whistle landed on the ground, bounced a few times and rolled to the living room on the first floor. When Klein looked around, he saw that things were now significantly different. For example, the head of the corpse wasn't separated from its body. He had strangled himself with his own hands. It really is easy when you're prepared. Klein chuckled and went down the stairs again. He successfully reached the first floor and picked up Isaac's copper whistle. He then swung it twice to see if there were any other wraiths or shadows here. After confirming that there were no more problems, he decided to head straight to the basement. As he walked down the flight of stairs and went through the door, he saw the picture he had seen in his dream divination. He saw the brown notebook on the long table. Other than the master key and the silver pocket watch with inlaid diamonds which were taken by the thief, this place is still in the same state as what I'd seen in my dream. Klein looked around and saw black iron pots, glass jars and bronze lampstands that had candles which had long since been extinguished. His spirit vision and spiritual perception told him that these were all very ordinary items. They didn't carry the slightest trace of a spiritual luster. But compared to before, there's still something extra. Klein reached out with his left black-gloved palm and touched the surface of the long table. His fingers were immediately stained with visible dust. After carefully and making some preliminary divinations, Klein failed to find any secret chambers or hidden compartments. Thus he turned his attention to the brown notebook. Carefully flipping through it, the contents of the first page entered his eyes. "This will go into the annals of the rise of a cursed family. I want to remember every key point. Future descendants, please remember every word that I've said. It's a pity that you lost control and died just moments after taking the Sequence 9 potion. The illustrious glory of the Abraham family can only remain as words." Klein lampooned under his breath and continued reading, quickly flipping through the pages. He planned to take the notebook away once he confirmed its value, not planning to stay any longer. We, the Abraham family, were one of the most powerful nobles of the Fourth Epoch, and we were the main supporters of the Tudor dynasty. In that era, be it Loan's Augustus family, Faisac's Einhorn family, Intis's Sauron family, or Phainopotter's Castilla family, all of them looked up to us. Indeed, they weren't weak back then, but we were stronger. Even the rumored Antigonus family and the Zerdal families were slightly weaker than us. Unfortunately, the glory of our family disappeared in the War of the Four Emperors. Ancestor Bethel went missing in that war where the deities personally fought. The remaining high sequence beyonders all perished. Ever since then, our Abraham family has been under a terrible curse. Generations after generations of ancestors have attempted to revive our family, but without exception, all of them went mad and lost control. Some of them did so just before becoming a high sequence beyonder or at sequence 7 and 8. And every case of losing control brings about a disaster that is close to annihilating the family. The accursed forget the family name carved in their bloodlines and hurt the other members of the family without restraint. They were already monsters. For the continuation of the family, the Abraham family made a painful decision to no longer live together. Instead, it split up into small families that migrated to various parts of the northern continent. That way, even if someone lost control and started a massacre, their bloodline wouldn't be cut off because of this. My father was afraid of the curse, so he chose to remain as an ordinary person. If it wasn't for the fact that the bloodline's last name is still ever shining, he wouldn't even be willing to tell me these things. I want to record this down. I want to keep it on my mind. I want to remember the glory and the disaster of the Abraham family. Every Beyonder generation would eventually lose control without exception. The curse of the Abraham family is even more terrifying than that of the City of Silver. Wait a minute, they should all be from the apprentice pathway. Could it be that they heard that Mr. Door's plea for help? This isn't a cry for help. It's clearly a life-depriving curse. However, according to Miss Magician's description, it isn't because she became an apprentice that she had heard those illusory ravings during the full moon, but because of her use of the bracelet on her wrist. Afterwards, she couldn't escape the ravings regardless of whether she wore it or not. And what's the reason for those Beyonders of the Abraham family? Perhaps the curse has nothing to do with Mr. Dorr? Well, the notebook mentioned that the ancestor of the Abraham family, Bethel Abraham, had disappeared in the War of the Four Emperors. Could he be Mr. Dorr? He was banished from the real world, lost in the darkness, and left trapped in a storm? There's a possibility that the easiest target to ask for help would naturally be descendants from the same bloodline who are of the same Beyonder pathway but of a relatively lower sequence. It's a pity that because all the powerful Beyonders had perished, his shouts only bring about a curse on the family that has lasted for more than 1,000 years, almost causing the whole Abraham family to disappear. Is this the reason why Mr. Dorr is so aware of the history of the fourth epoch and the details of the War of the Four Emperors? If my suspicions are true, I can only exclaim, the Abrahams really are an unfortunate family. I wonder if the things mentioned by the owner of the notebook were affected by the passage of time of over 1,000 years and the separation of the family, which might result in discrepancies. In the War of the Four Emperors, the deities actually personally participated in battle? Klein slightly frowned, and the speed at which he flipped the pages became faster and faster. Father, who chose to remain an ordinary person, ultimately succumbed to his disease. This dealt my mother a huge blow and she quickly departed with him. And that means I'm free. But what hurts me is that Father didn't tell me many things about Beyonders to prevent me from embarking down the cursed path. I have to come into contact with them myself and understand them. Thankfully, he didn't violate the orders of the elder. He still handed me the potion formula of apprentice, trickmaster, and astrologer at his deathbed. I will repeat the 3 formulas to prevent myself from forgetting. Sequence 9. Apprentice. Sequence 8. Trickmaster. Sequence 7. Astrologer. After Klein saw that, he pricked his eyebrows slightly, feeling that the trip tonight had been worthwhile, and that he hadn't wasted the purifying bullet. Of course, he still had to go above the gray fog to confirm its authenticity. Astrologer. The apprentice pathway actually has a divination series job as well. In that case, one of my speculations from the past might be closer to the truth. The seer pathway and the apprentice pathway might be interchangeable at high sequences. Klein nodded slightly and continued to flip through the pages. Although he had already determined the value of the notes, he didn't want to leave the scene for the time being. If the last few pages of the notebook noted that something had been hidden somewhere, he would definitely have to come back again. Since that was the case, why go through so much trouble? As the pages turned, Klein roughly figured out the Beyonder history of this Abraham descendant. After his parents died, he began trying to touch base with the mysticism circles to gather information about the sequence potions and purchase the corresponding Beyonder ingredients. After 2 years of hard work recording many still unconfirmed mysticism knowledge, he finally succeeded and concocted the apprentice potion. At the end of the notebook he wrote, "According to my knowledge of mysticism, the spirit world and the real world would overlap the most on the night of the full moon. That is the time when one's spirituality is at its best, and it is also the most suitable time to consume the potion and advance. I will become an apprentice by the next full moon. I need to get stronger step by step and reproduce the illustrious glory of the Abraham family. Once I reach sequence 7, I'll be able to contact the elders according to the regulations set by the family. I know the method of communication well, so this is a secret that cannot be recorded. Take a potion to advance yourself during the full moon?" Klein was stunned for a moment. He couldn't help but tap his chest 4 times in a clockwise manner to draw the crimson moon. "May the goddess forgive you for your ignorance." Klein vaguely understood why the man had lost control on the spot. According to his speculation, the curse that had plagued the Abraham family for more than 1,000 years was probably related to Mr. Dorr's call for help during the full moon. And that guy actually chose to consume the apprentice potion on the night of the full moon. In that case, it was highly likely that he would hear that illusory mumbles while the effects of the potion had yet to fade, and his spirituality was in a very unstable state. As such, he exploded with a bang. Fortunately, the hormesis, phlegria, that I heard back then wasn't lethal. Klein subconsciously sighed. Then he thought of the oddity of the master key and vaguely came up with a hunch. The formation of the master key stems not only from the condensation of an apprentice's Beyonder characteristic but also from Mr. Dorr's illusory ravings. Thus, the occasional problem of causing the holder to be lost becomes rather dangerous. It often allows the holder to enter inappropriate situations. This can be considered a kind of curse. And taking everything into consideration, Mr. Dorr being the ancestor of the Abraham family Bethel, is quite possible. Phew. Klein exhaled when he saw that there was no information about any hidden treasures. He took the brown notebook and left the basement. As he dropped Isaac's copper whistle, he retraced the same path he took to get there. When he reached the balcony, he raised his left hand and snapped his fingers. The scattered matches on the stairs lit up with a crimson light. They soon extinguished, leaving only minor burn marks. After taking a detour to East Borough to get rid of his disguise, Klein returned to Minsk Street before midnight. He went above the gray fog and used spirit dowsing to confirm the authenticity of the 3 formulas. Soon after, he tried to conjure the fake world opposite him on the mottled long table. Klein was about to manipulate him when he suddenly raised his hand and smacked his forehead. "I almost forgot. I brought the all-black eye back to the real world." After going through the trouble, he made the world appear in the majestic palace and changed the surroundings to look like that of an ordinary room. Then he made the world pose piously as he said with a hoarse voice, "The fool that doesn't belong to this era. Please tell Miss Magician that I've already obtained the Trick Master Potion formula. I hope that she can exchange it for items in the Sun domain which are good at purification and exorcism. If the value isn't equal, then I'm willing to make up for it with additional gold pounds." After manipulating the world, Klein turned the scene into a ball of light and transmitted it to the crimson star representing the magician. He clearly remembered that during the last time Miss Zio had found someone to purify and exorcise her, Miss Magician had also been present. Furs flipped through the calendar on her desk and used a pen to mark the date of the upcoming full moon. She had decided that as soon as she heard that horrible illusory raving, she would chant the name of the fool and pass the painful minutes above the gray fog. Life is truly filled with things to look forward to. She closed the novel in her hands, ready to turn off the iron grill gas lamp that was set into the wall. At that moment, a flash appeared in front of Furz's eyes. She saw the boundless gray fog and a lofty figure that resided in a majestic ancient palace, as well as a man who was praying devoutly. When the voice reached her ears, she almost jumped, feeling both alarmed and joyful. "The Trick Master formula that I've been arduously searching for all these years has been found just like that? I participated in so many different Beyonder gatherings and failed to find any clues to the Trick Master formula. Yet it has been found just like that? And not even a week has passed since I made the request. This is the Tarot Club. As expected, it's not something ordinary Beyonder gatherings can compare with." Furs sighed with emotion and endured her excitement and joy as she cautiously responded, "Mr. Fool, is that formula authentic?" "Yes." The fool, who was sitting on the high back chair and looking down, replied calmly. Furs suddenly clenched her fist and secretly pumped it by her waist twice. Almost without any hesitation she asked, "That was Mr. World, right? Please tell him that I will find what he needs as soon as possible." When the gray fog dissipated and everything was over, Furs remained stunned for 2 seconds. She couldn't suppress her excitement as she stood up to pace back and forth in her room. "The Sun's domain items that are good at purification and exorcism. I encountered them only twice in the past. But they were bought by others. They might not be willing to offer them again." Yes, back at Mr. A's gathering, Zio had hired a devotee of the eternal blazing sun to perform a purification and exorcism ritual. He's at least sequence 7 and he should have the relevant items. Or perhaps he grasps key clues to them. I just wonder how much it'll cost. Although Mr. World promises to pay the difference, I might not be able to come up with the amount needed for the initial payment. Furz's thoughts gradually shifted to her financial situation. She now had £370 in cash, mainly earned from what Viscount Glaint had paid for the apothecary formula. She also had £510 in her bank account, which added up to nearly £900. As for something similar, it can go as high as £2,000, while the cheapest might cost from £500 to £600. Yet, it might not necessarily be the kind of item that Mr. World needs. What if I run into a suitable item but don't have enough money? Get a loan from the bank or a loan from an usury with a higher interest rate. As long as all goes well, then when Mr. World pays the difference, my debt will easily be repaid. Maybe I could borrow from Miss Audrey for a few days. She usually never cares about money, so she will definitely not collect any interest. Furs quickly came up with a solution. Just then Zio, who had gone to somewhere secluded at night to practice her combat skills, returned to their rented 2-bedroom apartment. Seeing that the lights were still on in her room, she knocked on the door and asked, "Are you pulling an all-nighter to write the beginning of your new book? At first you seem really happy. Did the publisher increase your rates?" No, no, no. Furs was slightly taken aback before she forced a smile. "I just received a piece of information that's suspected to be a clue to the Trick Master Potion formula." "Really? Your waiting has finally paid off." Zio totally didn't notice Furs's hidden oddity. Seeing her good friend so happy for her, Furs couldn't help but sigh to herself. "I'm already a member of a secret organization. From that moment forth I've taken on a fate that requires me to constantly hide and lie to my friends. Is this the price, one out of many, to be paid?" Saturday morning. Klein once again visited inventor Leopard at St. George Burroughs' 3rd Street. Since the bicycle had yet to be patented, he only paid the last £20 and exhorted Leopard not to rush to talk about subsequent investments and partnerships until he had the patent. With regards to this, Leopard was very agreeable. He had been tricked twice before for the same reason. Before getting a patent, once the potential investors who he had made contact with had fully understood his product, he was kicked aside to watch as the potential investor bribed the patent office and acquired the patent first. After leaving Leopard's place, Klein arrived at Isengard Stanton's place in Hillston Borough at the appointed time. It was a dark and gloomy house. Today was the day that the rewards for the serial murder were going to be dispersed. Walking through the living room and into the activity room, Klein saw the two detectives he was more familiar with, Kaslana and Stewart, and sat down next to the latter. "Sherlock, how much do you think we'll get this time?" "It should be no less than protecting Adel." "Of course, I didn't do much, so what I can receive will be limited. Emperor Roselle once said, 'The more plowing and weeding, the better the crop.'" Stewart clenched his fist and held it to his bearded chin. Klein guessed with interest. The split might go as high as a few £100, and even the lowest wouldn't be less than £10. "And I'm the one that will get the higher end of the split." If Isengard Stanton's words were as credible as he had described, Klein added in his stirred heart. At that moment, a white-shirt, brown-vested Isengard, with white hair at his temples and a thinly contoured face, entered the activity room while carrying his signature pipe. As the fireplace burned, he sat down in a reclining chair and said with a smile, "Ladies and gentlemen, I just got back from the Backland police station. They acknowledged our contribution and they think we've been instrumental in cracking the case. Although we didn't participate in the subsequent capture, we can still obtain half the bounty. In other words, we'll split £1,000 in cash. This is considered quite a handsome bounty, even in Backland. A single detective has to have zero expenses, not eating or drinking and even resorting to sleeping on the streets, for 4 or 5 years to amass this amount." The atmosphere in the living room immediately became relaxed. Everyone was filled with anticipation about the reward they would receive. Even Klein was no exception as he guessed the amount Isengard would give him. "It should be at least £100, right?" he whispered silently. Isengard took a puff on his pipe, narrowed his eyes and said in a satisfied tone, "Everyone, thank you for your trust in me. I will now do the splitting." The biggest contributor this time was Detective Sherlock Moriarty. The ideas and train of thoughts that he provided us had allowed us to find more clues and put us on the right track. He's a genuine expert at deduction. Ma'am Kaslana can bear testament to this. I still have a few letters from Detective Moriarty, and anyone in doubt can take a look. That's very fair. He actually didn't list himself as the biggest contributor. Klein turned to the great detective Isengard Stanton and viewed him in a different light. It's no wonder that he has such authority in the detective circle. Seeing that there were no objections, Isengard nodded and said, "I declare that Detective Sherlock Moriarty will be awarded £300. Immediately, the detectives in the activity room broke out into whispers. From time to time they looked up at Klein, as if they finally recognized this brilliant detective whom Mr. Stanton had praised as an expert at deduction. What a generous man, a just man. Klein grinned and ultimately didn't act modestly. In second place were Isengard himself and Kaslana, who each received £160, while the rest of the detectives split the remaining £380 depending on their respective contributions. Even the lowest received £15, equivalent to 3 or 4 weeks of their usual earnings. This was the benefit of handling a major case with a high bounty. Stewart, who had received £40, was very pleased because he felt that he had only done 2 days of observation. Furthermore, the subject he observed ended up not being the final confirmed suspect. Of course, he also had to pay a portion of the £40. All informants and helpers involved in the matter had to be paid. After distributing the bounty, Stewart suddenly remembered something. He took out a piece of paper from his pocket and said to Klein, "Sherlock, I've recently accepted a missing person assignment that pays a lot. Try using your resources and help me pay attention to it. If the person is found, I won't forget your share." "Sure, no problem," Klein replied indifferently. Stewart handed over the piece of paper and said, "It's this man. He's been missing for nearly 2 weeks. As he's involved in some improper conduct or might even border on committing a crime, the client doesn't wish for us to seek the police's help." Klein nodded slightly and unfolded the paper. He saw a black and white photo that was made through lithography. It was a man with hair that was combed back in a slanted fashion, and there was a certain elegance in his propriety. He was about 27 or 28 years old. He had a handsome appearance, but there was an undisguised air of arrogance between his eyes. His nose was high and his lips were thin. "Right, his name is," Stewart recalled and said, "Emlyn White." "Emlyn White." Klein suddenly turned his head to look at Stewart. "Ah. Isn't that the name of the vampire who's imprisoned in the basement by Father Utravsky?" In Duke Negan's mansion, Audrey, who had been invited to a tea party, was listening to her mother and Duchess Della chatting about nobility matters with a slightly bored expression on her face. Her eyes swept across the 3-layered rack, the uniquely styled muffins, cake, and other delicious tidbits. She felt that she had been indulging herself recently, so she lightly picked up her cup and sipped the black tea. After a while, she got up apologetically and, accompanied by the maid, went to the bathroom. As soon as she came out, she met a tall, middle-aged woman with slender eyebrows and a graceful appearance. It was Duchess Della's younger sister, the wife of a hereditary viscount, Lady Norma. After exchanging the formalities, Norma looked at Audrey and said with a chuckle, "I heard that our beautiful young lady is very interested in mysticism?" She mentioned mysticism. "Could it be that someone from the psychology alchemists is here to test me?" Audrey instantly entered her state as a telepathist. A little embarrassed, she lowered her head and replied, "Yes." After hearing Audrey's affirmation, Lady Norma laughed. "What an honest child. I happen to know some experts in mysticism who are very knowledgeable. Would you like to chat with them?" "Definitely. That's exactly what I want." Praised the lady. Feigning surprise, Audrey drew a crimson moon on her chest. With a smile on her face, Madame Norma nodded slightly and said, "How about we have our afternoon tea together tomorrow?" "No problem." Audrey's excited eyes held a little innocence. After she bade Lady Norma farewell and headed for the living room, her smile gradually settled as her bearing turned composed and relaxed. The detailed changes in her body language, the color of her emotions, and the changes in her body of heart and mind that were reflected superficially, they all imply that she holds no ill intentions, but she was rather nervous. Seems like Lady Norma might really be a member of the psychology alchemists. She had been observing my expression and actions, but she couldn't adjust or hide her emotions. Maybe she's like Susie, a spectator, but unfortunately she didn't know that the person in front of her is a telepathist. Audrey thought, feeling both perturbed and proud. She couldn't help but let her feet gracefully walk in a straight line with one foot taking the place of the other. In the house of Isengard Stanton situated in Hillston Borough. Klein's lips quivered a few times, but in the end he didn't ask Stewart who his employer was or what he looked like. He decided not to get involved in matters involving Emlyn White as best as he could. Although based on Emlyn's words he was a law-abiding vampire, but that was only limited to his claims. There were still too many gaps about his earlier life for Klein to be sure that he had not harmed the innocent. As a result, he lacked the motivation to seek out Father Utravsky to save Emlyn. After all, Father Utravsky was a Dawn paladin who was skilled in combat and had the aid of mystical items. Furthermore, he was an unweakened Dawn paladin. Besides, it would make it easy for him to expose his true identity to Father Utravsky and Emlyn White. Let's hope that he can gain the approval of that powerful priest as soon as possible and finish the sentence to be let out on parole. In his heart, Klein tapped 4 times in a clockwise fashion for Emlyn White. After the bounty was divided, the detectives took their leave and Klein was given the best treatment. He was walked out the door by the great Detective Isengard. Holding his pipe, Isengard coughed lightly and said, "There are still some suspicious points about the serial murder case that we haven't fully understood. There might be an even more ferocious guy hiding behind the killer's back. You must be careful not to spread the word that you played an important role in this case. It seems like the official Beyonders also suspect that the gigantic devil dog has an owner." Klein replied solemnly, "I know, I had my own guesses about this too. Mr. Stanton, you have to be careful as well. You were the one who gathered us and you're a major partner of the police." Isengard put the pipe into his mouth, then he took it out and said, "Sherlock, I guess I'll call you Sherlock. You can rest assured that, although I'm no longer young, I'm still an outstanding fighter, an excellent marksman with an instinctive vigilance. Furthermore, you have a high probability of being a Beyonder not from the low sequences. I just wonder which pathway you belong to." Klein thought for a moment and said, "Mr. Stanton, you don't seem to be a native from Backland? Your accent is closer to that of Civilaus." "Yes, just like your mid-seashore accent," Isengard admitted frankly. The two detectives smiled at each other as an acknowledgement of the other's observational ability. Klein returned to 15 Minsk Street before nightfall. "Well, I now have 1,224 pounds in notes, plus 5 gold coins and a small amount of change. This is quite a considerable amount compared to how much I had when I first came to Backland. However, Sequence 6 Beyonder ingredients will cost at least 1,500 a pop. Sometimes, because they're scarce and rare, the price might even increase several-fold. And Beyonders who can obtain such items usually aren't low in sequence. They wouldn't misjudge its value and sell it at a low price. It's quite impossible to pick it up at bargain prices. Although the lady with the artisan behind her is very eager for the Dark Emperor potion formulas, she has to consider the progress of her advancement. For her to only be at Sequence 9, it's quite impossible for her to spend a large amount of money to buy the formulas up to Sequence 6 in advance, unless she's filthy rich. Well, you can't always be so exploitative." While in thought, Klein was in no hurry to prepare dinner. Instead, he went back to his bedroom, drew the curtains and went above the gray fog. He had an idea that he needed to verify. Sitting in the fool's seat, he stretched out his hand and picked up the unadorned brass master key. Based on the notebook he read last night from an Abraham descendant, he guessed that the man had lost control on the spot because of his choice of advancing during the full moon. Therefore, the curse-like ability of the master key, which can make people go lost, only to find themselves in bad spots, has a high probability of being contaminated by Mr. Door's illusory ravings, other than the resentment and indignation in the Beyonder characteristic. "So what sort of changes will it undergo when the moon is full?" Klein mumbled. Conjuring a pen and paper, he wrote the divination statement he had thought long in advance. What it manifests during the full moon. Holding the piece of paper in one hand and the master key in the other, Klein leaned back in his chair, gave a self-deprecating laugh and said, "I'm courting death again. But there shouldn't be too much danger this time. Mr. Door is far separated from the real world. He's lost in the depths of the darkness. Furthermore, I have the gray fog to shield me." In this case, the danger from divination was no different from direct divination. The experienced Klein half closed his eyes, and his pupils turning dark as he constantly chanted, "What it manifests during the full moon." After 7 times, Klein fell into a dream. In that gray, detached, illusory world, he once again saw the basement where the Abraham descendant had died. The flesh and blood here had long since dried up. The silver pocket watch inlaid with diamonds and the ancient-looking master key had yet to be stolen. They were still lying on the ground. Suddenly, a sharp, hollow voice echoed in Klein's ears. It was like a thin needle stabbing into his head, extending inside bit by bit, while it scraped as if it was going to completely peel off his scalp. This extreme pain caused Klein to wake up and sit up straight. He looked at the blue veins protruding on the back before they quickly restored to normal. It's much more manageable than spying on the eternal blazing sun or secretly listening to the true creator's angry roars. Klein went from pressing down his fingers to wrapping them as he thought. Of course, if this were the outside world, he believed that he absolutely wouldn't have had such a reaction. If Miss Magician had always been listening to such pleas, she would have long lost control. From the looks of it, due to the resulting curse, the master key makes the voice even clearer. That's not right. Father Yutravsky has likely survived the night of the blood moon with the master key in hand. He clearly wasn't affected. Perhaps he had stored the master key in his bedroom and stayed in the hall outside for confession. As long as one makes contact with the master key, they will hear the pleas during the full moon. Phew. Before becoming a high-sequence beyonder, I wouldn't dare listen to it in the real world. What I heard just now seemed to be requesting assistance in ancient Hermes. Klein carefully recalled and confirmed what he had heard. With regards to this, the only thing he could do was twitch the corner of his mouth. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is really a death-styled plea in the true meaning of the phrase. It's a pity. If only we could make those people from the Rose School of Thought hear Mr. Doerr's plea for help on the night of the full moon. With their already cold-warped personalities, they would definitely explode one after the other. After carefully considering if there was any way to achieve this goal, Klein returned to the real world, and according to his plan he enjoyed dinner, changed his clothes and left the house. He made 2 transfers and arrived outside the Bravehearts bar. He only circled it once without ordering any alcohol before leaving. While doing so he noticed that Casper's was back again. After walking a block, Klein specially got on a rental carriage and made the driver head to Cherwood Borough. An illusory figure appeared in front of him just as the horse moved forward. It was Miss Sharon wearing a long black regal dress. "Are you done with your preparations?" Sharon asked coldly. The soft black cap on her head was firmly pressed against her light blonde hair. Coupled with her pale face, her exquisite facial features gave her the beauty of a doll. Klein answered frankly, "Not yet. I'm still waiting for an item." Sharon said with unperturbed blue eyes, "I've prepared a mystical item. That's why you took the mission of being a 3-day bodyguard for £1,000? Back then the item caught your eyes but you lacked the money?" Klein smiled in enlightenment. "Don't be anxious. The more prepared we are, the greater the chance of success. Furthermore, I can usually use a mystical item from the Sun domain to make up for my shortcomings." Klein added in his heart. Seeing that Sharon had stopped talking, he said, "I came here today to get you guys to help me in an experiment." "What is it?" Sharon asked simply. Klein said with a serious and trustworthy expression, "According to Merrick's description, I think your curses are different. During the full moon he has to endure the crazy desire for bloodlust which makes him unable to fight. As for you, you would enter a weakened state if you do not absorb the souls of humans. Is that right?" Sharon listened quietly and nodded. "Yes. I don't have any solution to your problem at the moment, but I think it's still possible to suppress Merrick's problem temporarily. For example, taking appropriate medicine and letting him be in a state where he doesn't have any emotions. That way, during that time he won't be in pain and he will be able to participate in the battle." Klein expressed his thoughts. Sharon shook her head and said, "It doesn't work. Such medicine is no longer effective against him." "No longer?" "In other words, it had worked before?" Klein thoughtfully asked. "Why?" "He had injected too much in the past. Even if he changed types, it'll only be effective for the first 3 to 4 times. We're unable to find any new types," Sharon said, suddenly turning silent as though remembering something. Hearing her words, Klein immediately smiled. "I have a different kind of sedative here from that apothecary." Seeing that Sharon didn't say that this sedative was ineffective, he clasped his hands and continued, "I'll give you one and let Merrick try it during the full moon. It's going to be a full moon tomorrow night. If it's effective, let him drink 2 or even 3 in one go before the battle. As for whether he would develop a resistance to the same medicine in the future, that's not something that needs to be considered right now." Klein thought calmly. Sharon took the sedative that was stored in a glass tube, looked at the liquid that looked pure and lightly nodded. "All right." As expected of someone who doesn't waste her breath. Klein smiled and said, "Miss Sharon, can you tell me the candidate locations for the battleground that you've decided on? I wish to familiarize myself with the surroundings in the next few days. This way, no matter where you ultimately choose, my preparations would be more than sufficient. And since they have the right to choose the location of the final battle, they won't worry about the possibility of me informing the authorities or any other beyonder who might try to take advantage of the situation. Of course, if she really doesn't trust me, she could try another notarization." Klein thought quietly. Sharon stared at him for a few seconds with her blue eyes before saying, "Prepare a map of Backland when you're back. Leave it on the coffee table." "No problem. I hope that this cooperation will not only go smoothly but also be enjoyable." Klein habitually leaned forward to shake hands. Sharon lowered her head to take a look, and her figure gradually faded into the air. Klein continued his motion and raised his right hand to smooth his black hair, laughing dryly in the process. He had asked for the location of the battleground ahead of time, not only to prepare for the mission but also to be on guard against Sharon and Merrick. Although their philosophy was to suppress and restrain their desires, and it was unlikely they wouldn't kick someone to the curb when they'd outlived their usefulness. Klein couldn't be sure that Wraith Steve, Zombie Jason, and Werewolf Tyre didn't have what they had abnormally desired. If there really was a treasure that would cause any ordinary Beyonder to have strong malicious intent, Klein really couldn't guarantee that the two mutants would be able to control themselves. Therefore he had to figure out the environment in advance and prepare an escape route in the event that they wished to silence him. It wasn't that Klein didn't trust Sharon, who he had went through life and death with, but it was the most basic form of self-protection. One shouldn't have the heart to harm others, but one must be vigilant so as to not be harmed. Klein turned his head to look out the window and sighed inwardly in Chinese. One gas lamp after another kept being left behind as the carriage went forward. The streets became more spacious and cleaner, and it took him more than half an hour to get back to Minsk Street. It's really expensive taking a carriage at this time. Klein looked up at the nearly black sky and the red moon that seemed to barely pierce through the clouds. He walked on for a while and suddenly he saw that the house of Lawyer Jurgen was dark. Pulling out his gold pocket watch, he pressed it open and glanced at it. With a chuckle, Klein detoured to Jurgen's door and used the key that he had been given to open it. At that moment, Brody the black cat was already quietly sitting behind the door, staring at the visitor with his pair of dark round green eyes. The room was dark and silent, bleak and lonely. Klein squatted down and tried to touch Brody's head, but Brody quickly moved back and flung his hand away in disgust. Shaking his head with laughter, he got up, opened the valve and lit the gas lamp. Following Jurgen's descriptions, he went to the cupboard to find the food that had already been prepared. Then he went into the kitchen, lit the kettle to boil some water, and prepared Brody's favorite dish, boiled chicken breast. The black cat followed him in and with an agile leap, it reached the counter. It sat beside him and watched him without making a fuss. Klein glanced at it, rehearsing the shredding of chicken breast in his mind while he chatted with Brody. "You must miss Mrs. Doris, right? Are you worried about her condition? Lawyer Jurgen didn't come home today. Are you feeling lonely and uncomfortable on your own? Do you feel like you lack a sense of belonging and are exhausted?" As he spoke, Klein's voice slowly faded into silence. Brody the black cat remained sitting there, quietly watching him. It didn't make any noise, nor did it cry out. Audrey was invited to tea at Lady Norma's house. These are the mysticism experts that I mentioned. Lady Norma introduced the distinguished guests warmly. "This is Mr. Hilbert Alucard, a psychologist and a jewelry designer. He's very talented. This is Miss Escalante Osalka. She's a doctor for mental health, what we usually call a psychiatrist." Hilbert Alucard was a man in his 40s. He looked to be of southern continent descent and his skin was brown. His brown hair, blue eyes and facial features weren't particularly outstanding. He gave off a silent and reserved feeling. Escalante Osalka was a baby-faced lady who looked like a young girl studying at a public or grammar school even though she was already a psychiatrist. She was 3 or 4 centimeters shorter than Audrey, and she had long raven black hair that reached her waist and a pair of lake blue eyes. Audrey exchanged a few pleasantries with him, then she sat down, keenly aware that Alucard and Escalante were observing her. She didn't use her telepathist abilities and she pretended to know nothing. While initiating topics in the field of mysticism, she constantly paid attention to her emotions, ensuring that they were in the most logical state. "I can't let them find out that I'm already a Beyonder, and that I have already taken the spectator and telepathist potions." Audrey knew exactly what role she was to play today. Unlike the silent Alucard, Escalante was quite a conversationalist. After a few rounds of exchanges, she asked, "Do you know about major years and major months?" "No, I haven't heard of those," Audrey cautiously answered, using only the knowledge she had obtained from her interaction with mysticism enthusiasts. "In fact, I've already learned from Mr. Hanged Man what a major year and major month is," she added with a smile in her heart. A major year refers to the number of years it takes for the planet to deviate from its axis, totaling 25,920 years. In the field of mysticism, this is considered a complete cycle that goes from the beginning to the end. A major month refers to the number of years it takes for this deviation to pass through one of the 12 constellations. Each major month represents 2,160 years. During the transition of major months, terrible disasters will occur. And according to calculations, we aren't too many years away from the end of the current major moon. Escalante spoke with confidence, keeping the atmosphere harmonious. Audrey hid the fact that she knew a lot as she asked the wrong questions from time to time in a curious tone. With this, time passed quickly. At the end of tea time, Alucard and Escalante stood up at the same time to take their leave, leaving Lady Norma's house. This caused Audrey to be rather disappointed. She imagined that they would eventually hint at the matter regarding the psychology alchemists, but in the end they didn't say anything. Yes, as a secret organization that cannot be exposed, the examination of candidates can't be that simple and direct. From the looks of it, they will need to interact with me a few times and observe me in secret before they decide whether or not they want to reveal information to me and recruit me into the organization. That's good too, I can report this to Mr. Fool. Audrey quickly understood the underlying reasons. She then took her leave and Lady Norma walked her to the door, smiled and said, "Audrey, I see that you're also interested in psychology. Why not consider being a psychiatrist before you get married? Count Hall and his wife are followers of the goddess. They should be able to support you in doing such things." Among aristocrats, unless there was a financial crisis or other special situations, coming to an agreement on marriage required a long process. Only after careful consideration and comparisons would they be able to make a decision. This was because this wasn't only a matter between two youngsters, but it also involved the alliance and mutual assistance of the two families. Therefore, although aristocratic women were able to officially enter social events under the direction of the queen after the age of 18, proclaiming their adulthood and consideration for marriage, they often started a family after the age of 26 according to statistics. Similarly, the average age of a male aristocrat's entry into politics for the first time was 28.5 years. In other words, Audrey would have about 8 years to do what she liked after she reached adulthood. The Church of the Evernight Goddess had always encouraged female believers to go out to work and engage in certain occupations. In the aristocratic circles, many young ladies and women became literary critics, musicians, pianists, painters, etc. Is this a test? Audrey smiled faintly and replied, "I will need to read more books in that case." Actually, she had always felt that it wasn't too safe for the members of the psychology alchemists to become psychologists or psychiatrists because the upper echelons of the official organizations, such as the Nighthawks and the mandated punishers, likely knew of the acting method. Therefore, they would definitely pay more attention to this group of people. Lady Norma seemed pleased with her answer and nodded with a smile. Escalante and Alucard are both good teachers. Well, maybe I could consider asking Miss Escalante to be my home tutor on psychology. Audrey nodded obediently. When Klein got up on the early Sunday morning, he found that the map of Backland on the coffee table in the living room had been circled in several places, and they weren't too far apart. Therefore, he spent the rest of the morning carefully familiarizing himself with the surroundings, figuring out exactly where the buildings were located, and where the nearest cathedral was. In the afternoon, having time to spare again, he went to the Quellac Club to practice his shooting and beyonder powers. As soon as he entered the hall, he saw the surgeon, Aaron Series, hobbling out slowly from the buffet cafeteria with a crutch. After greeting him, he asked out of concern, "How have you been lately, Aaron? Has your luck improved?" Aaron, who was born with a blank face, smiled sincerely. "At least I'm not that unlucky anymore. I followed your suggestion, went to the cathedral and told the bishop about the matter. He told me to go directly to the confessional to pray to the goddess. I actually fell asleep while praying, but I felt like the goddess had bestowed me with a peaceful state. After that, my luck has been normal. Praise the lady." He drew a crimson moon on his chest. "According to my experience, it was likely a particular sequence 7 nightmare who caused you to fall into a deep sleep. Then a Nighthawk who specializes in rituals quickly set up an altar, prayed to the goddess and neutralized your misfortune." Klein smiled. "That's great." At that moment, Aaron looked at him and said, "Sherlock, I've always felt that you weren't very pious in your belief of the god of steam and machinery. Why don't you change your faith? Look at me, a perfect example. Put your faith in the goddess. Aren't you making things difficult for me?" Upon hearing Aaron's request, Klein almost drew the crimson moon on his chest, but he ultimately resisted the urge and replied very seriously, Perhaps there's something about my behavior that has led you to misunderstand. But I have to tell you that faith is something that cannot be changed after it's decided upon. Aaron immediately raised his arms and made an apologetic gesture. I'm sorry that I misunderstood your faithfulness. I shouldn't have taken your faith as a joke. All right, our differences in faith do not prevent us from becoming friends. Klein wiped away the fake expression he put on and smiled. That's not true in Faisak and Faina Potter. They can only accept one faith. In comparison with so many churches coexisting for more than 1400 years, Lone and Intis are much more open in this respect. Before Aaron could answer, he casually changed the subject. Did you see Septon again? I'm referring to the kid that had one of his legs amputated, the one who said that your luck would turn for the worse. He was certain that the Nighthawks would follow the clues provided by Aaron, so he wondered what the outcome was. He was curious if the child who changed Aaron's luck still had the tarot card in his possession. No, I haven't seen him since he left the hospital. Aaron shook his head firmly. What a pity. The Nighthawks can find his address according to the hospital's records, and it's not convenient for me to be involved. Of course, the child might have moved away long ago. After a brief exchange with Aaron, Klein decided to head for the underground shooting range, familiarizing himself with his free revolver with ordinary bullets. At this moment, two more acquaintances came in. One was a member of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council, Coim Company shareholder, Ma'am Mary, and the other was Klein's landlord, Stellan Sammer. They were all wearing relatively light skirts, making them look much younger. According to the rules of the club, each member could only bring in one additional person. Therefore, Mary's maid and her bodyguard were left in the reception hall. Klein politely greeted them and praised them out of courtesy. Ladies, you two are as beautiful as ever today, and yet there is a beauty that's different from your usual beauty. Having come into contact with a lot of important figures recently, Mary smiled and said, Roselle said that exercise is a necessity of life and Stellan is always at home, dealing with trivial matters. Even when she's out, she would be participating in parties and listening to operas. Her health is much worse than it used to be, so I brought her here to play tennis and squash. With her high cheekbones, she looked around and saw a member of the House of Commons and two other members of Parliament of the Greater Backland area. She then turned to Stellan and said, I see someone I know. Excuse me while I head over to greet them. You can wait for me at the library. All right. Compared to Mary, Stellan was clearly much prettier, but towards this lady she seemed very respectful and docile. After Mary had gone some distance away, she slightly raised her chin, looked at Klein and asked, Mr. Moriarty, you seem very busy these days? Yes, I was working with a lot of detectives to help the police investigate the serial murder case. We made a certain contribution and received quite a sizable reward, Klein answered truthfully. Stellan covered her mouth with her hand. Really? What did the murderer look like? Why did he kill those ladies? The newspapers had been very vague. I'm sorry, I have to comply with the confidentiality clause. Klein deftly made up an excuse. It's not like I can tell you that it had a body of black fur, a smooth, glistening tail, and that it likes to run on all fours. Klein lampooned inwardly. Stellan nodded regretfully and then she asked curiously, So how much did you get? It was split among quite a number of us. Klein didn't answer directly. Was there 50 pounds? Stellan pressed. Yes. Klein nodded, honestly. Stellan Sammer smiled. You earn a lot more than I imagined. You really are a capable detective. No, it might take years to come across such a case. Klein smiled and shook his head. No matter what, you have proven your ability. Stellan's eyes looked like they were thinking as she said, Next Sunday Luke and I will be hosting a party at home. I hope you can come. Sorry. I was very presumptuous. I'll have my maid send the invitation to you. Haha, there will be a lot of unmarried ladies at the party, and their fathers or mothers will have decent jobs, and their families will earn more than £200 a year. Some of them have part-time jobs that they can do at home, such as being a typist. They're all very excellent women. This is a blind date party. Mrs. Stellan has approved of my ability to make money as a detective, so she plans on introducing me to a girl? But in her eyes, am I only fit to be with a woman at that level? Many thoughts flashed through Klein's mind, but after considering the need to maintain their neighborly friendliness and the trouble of preparing his own dinner, he agreed with a smile. If all goes well, I'll be there on time. Stellan smiled and said, Then Luke and I will be awaiting your visit." She left without another word and entered the small library of the club, while Klein proceeded to practice his shooting and beyonder powers in the small enclosed shooting range. At 9 o'clock at night, Klein was sitting at his desk, watching as the crimson moon gradually pierced through the clouds, revealing a full body. The water-like light red veil slowly spread out and time passed by the minute. When it was 10:15, he heard illusory pleas that seemed layered. Klein easily guessed that it was from Miss Magician. Closing the curtains, he switched off the lights, took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray mist. There he reached out to touch the shrinking and expanding crimson star. In a split second, the hazy figure of Furs appeared on the chair with the symbol of a layered door. She let out a sigh of relief, stood up and bowed. "Honorable Mr. Fool, you have saved me once again." "That's not something to worry about," Klein replied in a very light, casual tone. Furs was left speechless and sat down again. She was considering what had just happened, so she didn't say anything. As for Klein, he didn't take the initiative to bring up any subjects in order to maintain his image. Within the towering palace, which looked like a giant's residence, the silence quickly transformed into the main theme. When Furs snapped back to her senses, she suddenly felt that this atmosphere was a little oppressive and uncomfortable. During the gathering, there's still Miss Justice, Mr. World and company. There was no need to worry about complete silence, but now there's only Mr. Fool and me. What should I do? This pressure is stifling. I need to say something, I have to. I can't just sit here like an idiot. That's Mr. Fool. He certainly wouldn't care about anything, but I'm so nervous and restricted. First suddenly felt as though she had found herself alone with her boss when she first entered the workforce. Although Klein wasn't a spectator, he could clearly see Miss Magician's restraint and uneasiness. He smiled and said, "Maybe you can tell me how you became a Beyonder. For example, how you obtained the apprentice formula and that bracelet." Klein silently added the real question he was trying to get by. Furs relaxed a little and recalled. "That was almost 3 years ago. I just graduated from Backlund Medical School. With my father's help, I entered a private clinic with pretty good benefits. My father had already settled down in East Balham back then. Ever since the safe sea route to the southern continent was discovered, the outstanding youth of the kingdom started spreading their footprints to every corner of the land. My father, as a low-level military officer, went to East Balham to chase after wealth and power. My mother and I were left behind in Backlund to live like widows. It would take months before a distant letter sent by boat would arrive. This situation isn't uncommon in the kingdom. I knew an old gentleman who had 5 children, but they were either in the archipelago, Western Balham, the Paws Valley or the Hajenti Plains. They have their own career, their own family and their own wealth, but they've forgotten that there is a father waiting for their return all this time. When I was in grammar school, my mother fell seriously ill. I had no choice but to helplessly watch her die on the hospital bed, and it took my father a month to answer my letter, telling me that he had a new family and a new life in East Balham. He gave me all his property in Backlund plus some money. I think he felt a little guilty. As a best-selling novel writer, Furs had mastered the art of rambling. Since Klein had nothing to do, he listened quietly without interrupting. Phew. Furs exhaled and continued. "Anyway, my father introduced me to Yosifov Clinic through the Veterans Club. The salary there was really good and I was doing pretty well, but I was a little anxious about the future. Hence, I worked hard to learn from the senior doctors and worked hard to save money until I met an old lady who came to see me regularly. She was very lonely and childless, and her partner had passed away 10 years ago. I had some sympathy for her, so I often talked to her and accompanied her. Once I was surprised to find that she was able to walk through walls, which opened a whole new world to me. That old lady said that it was something her husband left her. She vaguely mentioned that as long as one wasn't a member of some family, there was apparently no curse. Not long after, she was so ill that she was on the verge of passing away. She asked me if I wanted to become someone like her. I was very young then and I still had a lot of fantasies in my head. I agreed without any hesitation. She gave me the formula and told me to watch her body after she died and take away the glowing object that would suddenly appear. And this was the thing she left me, which could be used as the main ingredient of a potion. Also, she gave me this bracelet, telling me not to use it unless I'm in absolute danger. She also told me not to pay too much attention to the ravings during the full moon. Unfortunately, I was ultimately unable to avoid danger. After using it once, the full moon's raving became worse. It seems like that was a widow of a particular Abraham. She had used her own experience to prove that the curse only existed in the bloodline. Klein nodded. Once you become a high-sequence beyonder, the ravings wouldn't have much of an effect on you. I hope so. Although she didn't believe she could become a high-sequence beyonder, she believed in Mr. Fool. It was Monday again, and as soon as Klein got up, he went downstairs and saw an open sheet of paper on the coffee table in the living room. Effective. That's good. Klein immediately let out a sigh of relief. At 15 minutes to 3 in the afternoon, he promptly went above the gray fog to prepare for the new Tarot Club gathering. The sight of the towering stone pillars that supported a high dome and the mottled and ancient long table that appeared to have been placed there since hundreds, if not more than 1,000 years ago, entered the eyes. Although Audrey Hall had seen this scene many times, she would still feel a kind of shock that came from the bottom of her heart the moment she arrived above the gray fog. Out of the corner of her eye, she scanned the surroundings and didn't see any new members. She then looked up and bowed to the person in the thick gray fog. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." As she spoke, she suddenly saw a card covered with a complicated pattern on the table to the right of the Fool. It was lying there quietly, casually, like an ordinary object. Is that the card of blasphemy? A card of blasphemy that hides one of the paths of the divine. Audrey immediately understood. After the Fool nodded in response, she subconsciously glanced at the Hanged Man, the Sun, and the Magician, and she found that they had also noticed the card that didn't exist in the past. However, their eyes and actions revealed their doubts and astonishment, as well as their inevitable conjectures. After all, a card that could be placed by the mysterious and lofty Mr. Fool was definitely not an ordinary item. Well, Mr. World's reaction is a little odd. He's not even looking there. Is he able to hide his thoughts so well? Is he really the nemesis of a spectator and telepathist? Audrey quickly decided that, other than Mr. Fool, the card of blasphemy was known only to herself. This made her feel quite proud. It was a feeling like sharing a secret with her parents when she was young while she kept her 2 elder brothers in the dark. That's a card of blasphemy created by Emperor Roselle, a treasure that countless beyonders in the mysterious world dream of. Audrey took the initiative to raise her hand after the Magician, the Sun, and the others did their greetings. "Honorable Mr. Fool, I have something I would like to report to you alone." Alone? Alger frowned slightly as he subconsciously tried to guess at the content but was without any clue. Derek and the others were also curious, but they didn't think too much about it. Klein nodded slightly and said, "Sure." Frankly, he had no idea what Miss Justice was going to report to him. After waiting 2 seconds, he blocked off the senses of the rest of the members and gestured to Justice. Audrey sat with a dignified posture and said with a sincere attitude, "Mr. Fool, as I had asked to purchase the spectator formula at a Beyonder gathering, there has been 2 suspected members of the psychology alchemists who came into contact with me recently through certain nobles. I'm inclined to join them, but only if I can guarantee my own safety. What is your opinion on this? I've attached great importance to this. Psychology alchemists. From the evidence from various sources of information, it's not considered an evil organization. At present, they might not have a deity that they believe in. Its main mission is to explore and research one's mind, consciousness, psyche, and spirituality. It's more like a scientific self-help group. Of course, among the Orthodox churches, it's also a form of sacrilege since they believe that everyone's spirit belongs to God. And according to Daxter Guderian, the upper echelons of the psychology alchemists definitely have an inclination. The original creator, the God that created everything, and they worship him, to a certain extent, a rather primitive form of worship. Many thoughts flashed past Klein's mind as he finally said with a smile, "If you think it's suitable, you can do so. If you encounter a problem, you can seek help from the Tarot Club. Thank you for your suggestion." Audrey instantly felt relieved. Klein thought for a moment and added using a calm and leisurely tone, "Inside the psychology alchemists, there are people planted by the churches, such as informants of the mandated punishers and nighthawks. You have to know how to hide and conceal yourself. Mr. Fool is so nice to remind me to be careful." Audrey slightly bent her eyes and replied with a shallow smile, "In the future, there will also be an informant from the Tarot Club inside the psychology alchemists. Miss Justice, you haven't even joined and you're already thinking of betraying them." Klein silently drew an invisible crimson moon for the psychology alchemists. After reporting the matter of the psychology alchemists, Audrey wasn't in a hurry to end the conversation. Instead she said, "Mr. Fool, I've memorized another 2 pages of Roselle's diary." That was also why she had asked to speak to him in private. If she had conjured Roselle's diary and given it to Mr. Fool under the witness of the magician Furs, she could imagine that at the end of the gathering Furs would immediately come to her and borrow those Roselle's notes she had bought in the past. And with regards to this, the goddess could prove that Mr. Fool had seen them all. "I forgot to do so previously. One of these 2 days I'll find an opportunity to tell Furs that the Roselle notes I bought were torn apart by Susie. Yes, torn apart into pieces that cannot be restored. I'm sorry, Susie." Audrey repented in her heart. "Very good." Klein knocked gratefully on the edge of the long bronze table to help Miss Justice conjure the diary pages. When he had the 2 pages in hand he cast his eyes over, only to have his smile gradually stiffen. The first line of the journal read, "March 6th. Damn it, I'm almost constipated from eating the food here. This is what I saw at the Roselle Memorial Exhibition." Klein hid his expression and turned to the second page. He found that the contents were still the complaints and novel experiences of Roselle's early days of his transmigration. They were of no practical use. He controlled his expression and smiled. "Do you wish to deduct from the gold pounds you have yet to pay, or do you wish to get something else in return?" Audrey said without any hesitation, "Mr. Fool, I would like to know which path of the divine that card of blasphemy is. You really treat money as dirt." Klein silently sighed as he didn't hide his smile as he said, "That is the Dark Emperor card. The corresponding sequence 9 is lawyer. So that's what it is." After receiving her answer, Audrey felt abnormally satisfied. After the private conversation ended, the magician Furs looked eagerly at the World who sat right at the other end. "Mr. World, I will try my best to gather a mystical item or powerful beyonder weapon in the Sun domain. What kind of deal did you 2 make in private?" Despite feeling very familiar with Furs, Audrey wasn't aware of this, so she couldn't help but ask. Furs let out a sigh and said, "Mr. World has helped me find the formula to Trick Master." "Mr. World sure is capable at finding formulas. Does he have extensive and reliable resources and connections in this field?" Audrey listened in surprise. The hanged man, Alger, concealed his solemn expression, once again re-evaluating the World and raising his assessment of him. As for Derek, he felt rather expectant. He hoped that after he finished digesting the light supplement potion, Mr. World would be able to easily find for him the formula for Sequence 7, Solar High Priest. The World laughed hoarsely when faced with the numerous gazes that were staring at him. "Miss Magician, before you purchase it, it's best that you chant Mr. Fool's honorable name and request that he pass the relevant information to me." "Yes, I have already sought Mr. Fool's permission and he has agreed to help us. If I'm not satisfied with the items that you have set your eyes on, perhaps I will consider switching to another request." Klein now had 3 alternatives for the items in the Sun domain, so he planned to compare them before making any finalization. One of them was the brooch which old Mr. Eye of Wisdom had mentioned. It had the effect of purifying and warding off evil spirits and letting the wearer use a portion of the spells in the Sun domain. The negative effect was that the wearer would never feel cool, forever stuck in a hot and irritable state. Klein found the mystical item only okay, and since the price could be close to £2,000 he was unable to afford it, even if he had sold the Briber formula. Therefore he planned to wait a few days. If Miss Magician and the lady with the artisan backing her couldn't find something better, then he would cash out the formula and buy the brooch. "Okay, I'll give you the information no later than tomorrow." Furs had confirmed that Mr. A would be hosting a gathering that very night, but she had given herself another day for any unexpected outcomes. When the conversation was over, Alger looked around and said as if he had already prepared a draft, "I recently took on an investigative mission. I'm not sure if you have any relevant leads. In the past 2 to 3 years, many original native tribes in the southern continent have been plundered and all their people were taken away. In the various colonies on the islands at sea, some slaves have also mysteriously escaped. Such situations have not happened in a long time since the countries of the northern continent abolished the slave trade. Have you all heard anything that's relevant?" His eyes swept over Justice, the magician and the World, but he didn't look at the sun. How could a boy trapped in the city of silver inside the forsaken land of the gods know about what was happening outside? Audrey carefully recalled the conversations she had heard at the many noble gatherings, but after a while she said, "No, I've never even heard of such a thing." The magician and the world shook their heads. Is this indicating that slave trading in the black market is flourishing again? Why would they need so many slaves? Klein sat at the end of the long bronze table and thought about the matter suspiciously. Seeing that no one could provide any clues, and how Mr. Fool showed no interest whatsoever by not interrupting, he said without changing his expression, "You can attempt to seek out the formula for Wind Blessed. I will provide you with payment that would absolutely be enough to satisfy you." The formula for the Wind Blessed? He's almost done digesting the potion of the seafarer. Klein activated his spirit vision and glanced at the hanged man. Sure enough, he found that the surface layer of his astral projection was not only pure blue like the sea, but it also had slight ripples as if slowly undulating. If I do the math, it took Mr. Hanged Man nearly 4 months to digest the seafarer potion. He's often at sea. Audrey also made a judgment based on what she had observed. Another point that Furs paid more attention to was that Mr. Hanged Man was likely a sequence 7. A mid-sequence beyonder. She nodded indiscernibly and said to herself. After the Hanged Man finished announcing his mission, Derek raised his hand and said with some apprehension, "I've been assigned to go on a mission. I will be heading to the half-destroyed temple that I mentioned previously in the near future. Yes, the one related to the fallen creator. The leader responsible for this operation is Shepherd Elder Lovia. Do you have any suggestions?" "Suggestions? My advice is to stay as far away as possible." Upon hearing the son's question, Klein instantly had such an answer in his mind. However, in order to preserve the image of the fool and see what the others would suggest, he remained silent and did not manipulate the world to speak. After a short moment of silence, Alger turned his head to look at the son. He said in a staid and gentle voice, "You have provided too little information, so it's difficult for us to give any useful advice. The only thing we know of regarding that semi-destroyed temple is the presence of the true creator, or in other words, the fallen creator's unique statue. We don't know what else is there, so naturally, we aren't able to make much of an analysis of the situation. The fallen creator is indeed the true creator. To think that there's faith in the true creator in the city of silver where the sun lives. There's even a temple built." The magician Furs listened with relish and almost wanted to write it down. Justice Audrey waited for the son's description of the strange temple in anticipation. Derek nodded, his eyes looking up for a few seconds before he said, "In addition to the statue, there are also many incomplete murals with terrifying evil spirits lingering around. However, they have already been eliminated by the exploration team led by 2 elders from the 6-member council. I've yet to see those murals with my own eyes. It's said that it records the prophecy of the end of days and how the fallen creator will save his believers, as well as the corresponding bloody ritual. In the corner of a certain mural, there are some strange characters that appear to be evolved from Jotun. After some deciphering, a few elders believe that they meant Rose Redemption. This might a code name for the original muralist. It might also be the code name of the organization that built the temple and the city. According to the chief's judgment, these murals are at least 1,000 years old. The 1,000 years I'm referring to is the one that you know, but I'm not completely sure. In the city of silver, we use the frequency of lightning to demarcate our days. It's considered night when the lightning eases up and day when there's plenty of lightning. One cycle is a day and the 4 seasons only exist in books, so we can't grasp the specific number of days. Only the chief can confirm that." At this point in the son's story, Furs suspected that she was listening to a fairy tale. A city without the sun, without the red moon, without day and night or changes in the seasons. It sounded unreal no matter how she listened to it. Only fairy tales or novels would make such daring descriptions. And the author has to smoke cannabis and be in a state of psychotic madness in order to create such a city. The first thought that came to her mind after her astonishment was, "I want to use the City of Silver as a blueprint for a novel." However, she soon gave up on this idea, for she didn't know what the City of Silver really implied. She wasn't sure if it was a secret that was collectively concealed by the 7 churches, and she was afraid that as soon as the book was published she, as the author, would have the Nighthawks knocking on her door, claiming to collect the copper pennies in her gas meter. So that's the kind of environment which the City of Silver has. The sun also often mentions of monsters lurking deep in the darkness. Unfortunately, I'm only at sequence 8. Otherwise, I would really like to ask Mr. Fool to send me there for an adventure. No, Audrey, you are no longer an innocent girl. You should be aware of how much danger is involved in this matter. Justice Audrey switched between letting her thoughts run wild while also engaging in self-reflection. At least 1,000 years? The Aurora Order hasn't been in existence for more than 3 centuries. Might not even be 2 centuries old. It's unlikely to be built by them. Perhaps the true creator's faith had begun as early as the 5th epoch or even the 4th epoch. However, the organization that revered him wasn't the Aurora Order. In the next 1 to 2,000 years, the 7 Orthodox churches have been repressing it, causing the true creator's believers to be in a crisis. The churches have destroyed them again and again, and finally they had resurrected themselves as the Aurora Order. Klein, who had some guesses, made his seating posture and state appear unchanged. Derek paused for 2 seconds and continued. A preliminary cleanup of the terrifying monsters in the city ruins and the half-destroyed temple has been done. Our mission this time is to explore the underground parts of the temple. Do you have any suggestions? With your understanding of the fallen creator, what should I pay attention to? My suggestion? Alger said without almost any hesitation, my advice is absolutely not to go. The fallen creator is a true evil god. Even if his temple has been destroyed, it might still contain abnormal danger which cannot be easily detected. If the one leading your team is one of the other elders of the 6-member council, then there's nothing wrong if you insist on going. It will just be risky. But you just mentioned that the person in charge of this matter is Shepherd Lovia, and the true creator is the deity standing at the peak of this beyonder pathway. Therefore absolutely do not go, Alger added. Your suggestion is the same as mine, but it doesn't require the sun to describe the half-destroyed temple. You could have come up with this conclusion with the conditions at the beginning. I understand. Mr. Hanged Man, you were doing it on purpose. This way you got a rough idea of the state of the temple without paying anything. You're really just bullying a little kid. Sitting at the end of the table, Klein leisurely reached out his hand to support his forehead. The sun was silent for a few seconds, and seemingly having been put in a tough spot, he said, "But the mission is compulsory." The Hanged Man chuckled and said, "Nothing is necessary. Will you still be participating in patrols before this mission? Find an opportunity and deliberately let the monsters injure you. As for how serious it should be, you can reference the past cases in the City of Silver." At this moment, Audrey read a message from Sun's eyes and movements. That actually works? After a brief period of surprise and confusion, Derek frowned and said, "But I don't have any patrolling missions in the near future." Alger sneered. "You can always pretend to be on the brink of losing control. No, to be precise, you can push yourself to the brink of losing control. Under such a situation, I believe the higher-ups of the City of Silver would definitely not bring dangerous baggage with them on the exploratory mission, right? There is a trick. As long as you keep your spirituality in an empty state for 2 days, you will begin to hear auditory hallucinations and show signs of losing control. If you stop suppressing yourself, then your situation will improve in a week and you wouldn't really lose control. Of course, your City of Silver definitely has some solutions and contingencies to cure those who show signs of losing control. Your recovery would definitely be quick, so you need to time yourself perfectly. It's best if you start doing so 2 to 3 days before you set off." Derek was stunned for quite a while before he muttered to himself, "Yes, those who show signs of losing control will be placed under control and be quarantined underground in the spire, where they will be treated with medicine, rituals, and mystical items. If the situation isn't too serious, then they only need to consume medicine. Sigh, an honest and good kid has been corrupted by an old fox just like that. But, Mr. Hanged Man, how do you know of this trick of pushing yourself to the brink of losing control? If you use this trick often, losing control might really happen." Klein sighed in his heart. Audrey was dumbstruck when she heard this. She felt as though she'd been educated. Seeing that the sun was still hesitating as though he didn't wish to lie to the City of Silver's elders, Alger slowly asked, "Do the other elders of the 6-member council know that the fallen creator controls the shepherd pathway?" "They don't." Derek shook his head honestly. Alger asked again, "Do you think it's possible that Shepherd Elder Lovia will do harm to the City of Silver? Just answer yes or no. There's no need for any explanations." "Yes." Derek finally couldn't lie to himself. Alger chuckled and said, "So, you are the only one who knows of this matter. But you haven't found a way to warn the other elders of the six-member council, right? Yes. Derek's expression grew heavier. Alger changed his seating posture as he leaned back. This mission carries immense risk. This is something you know. If you die in that half-destroyed temple, then who will be able to find a way to expose the strangeness of Shepherd Lovia? Who can save the City of Silver from this crisis? The fallen creator is a real evil god. You are not pretending to lose control or lying to others for your own personal interests. You are doing so to save the City of Silver. Comparing your honor to that which is more important? Derek clenched his teeth and nodded solemnly. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Hanged Man. Audrey and Furs suddenly had the urge to facepalm themselves. He really is an easily fooled child. However, that's good too. It prevents the Tarot Club from losing members in the near future. Klein sighed silently as he controlled the world to say, I have a question to ask Mr. Sun. This could involve a transaction. Therefore, I'm requesting a private exchange. Klein quickly switched back to himself and nodded indifferently. Sure. After the others were screened, the world looked at the sun and asked, does the City of Silver have a way to remove an evil god's mental corruption on a Beyonder characteristic? This was something Klein had wanted to ask a few times before, but considering that Justice and the others might also be interested, and if the sun was unable to answer questions that involved an evil god, then all eyes would likely be cast toward the godlike Mr. Fool. Therefore he had restrained his impulse. It was only moments ago when he got inspiration from Miss Justice and came up with the idea of communicating privately. We have never encountered an evil god. Derek answered earnestly, we can only separate a rampager's mental corruption from a Beyonder characteristic. That's it. This might actually work. After all, I have the gray fog. Klein suppressed his joy and made the world speak. What do you need in return? It's not a matter of compensation. Sun shook his head. That method and the corresponding knowledge requires me to be at least the captain of a patrol team, or even a strong warrior like the captain of an exploration team in order to be privy to such matters. The former requires being Sequence 7, while the latter requires a minimum of Sequence 6. Phew. Klein sighed, letting the world hoarsely say, I hope that you can attain the qualifications as soon as possible. After the private communication between the world and the sun, the tarot gathering began its free discussion session. Audrey asked with great interest about the unique scenery of the sea and of any strange happenings, while Alger gave selective descriptions according to his own knowledge. Furs listened quietly and was inspired to write a novel about a pirate king, of how he captures a female passenger and has a complex love affair with her, a fantasy that coexisted with reality. Derek could only imagine what the sea looked like based on the paintings in the City of Silver and the corresponding words. In the end, Klein, whose spirituality was gradually drained, announced the end of the tarot gathering. After which he quickly returned to the real world and made up for it with a nap. 7:30 at night. In Empress Borough. Inside a particular noble's house. First put on a hooded robe. After so many days she was once again attending the gathering organized by Mr. A. She sat quietly in a corner and whilst pretending to casually survey her surroundings, she noticed that Mr. A, who was sitting alone on the sofa, seemed a little different from before. This wasn't a change in appearance or temperament, because the other party's face was completely hidden in the shadow of his hood, preventing her from making out anything. The difference she felt was an almost intuitive feeling. Mr. A is no longer as carefree and indifferent as before, with him always looking at everyone in a supercilious manner. The current him seems to be very repressed, like he's trying his best to control something. He feels a lot more dangerous now. In the past Mr. A was a mountain. Now he's more like a reared-up snake sticking out its tongue vociferously. The best-selling writer Furs suddenly felt grateful that she hadn't gotten Zio to come with her since she needed to hide matters about the Tarot Club and not let her know that she was looking for something in the Sun domain. This way, even if there are any accidents, my escape would be much easier. She rotated the bracelet which only had 2 stones left. She was in no hurry to write down her request to hand over to the attendant. Instead she patiently observed for a while. It wasn't that she was naturally cautious, but the lessons of the past had left her with deep impressions. The 2 stones on her bracelet were evidence of this. After waiting for more than 10 minutes she finally picked up a piece of paper and a pen in front of her and wrote in deliberately distorted handwriting, seeking to buy mystical items or powerful Beyonder weapons in the Sun domain. After handing the note to the attendant, Furs looked around again, but she couldn't find the eternal blazing sun believer, who had helped with the purification and exorcism ritual, among the disguised or masked figures. Trades took place as the attendants shuttled about. The entire hall remained quiet and orderly. After an exchange in the middle of the gathering, Furs's request was added to the 2 chalkboards right in front. Not long after, she received a reply from the attendant. A small slip of white paper was filled with dense words. Mystical item, band of light ring. It can make the wearer an envoy of light, an attendant of the sun. They will be immune to various diseases and wield sacred powers. The wearer can summon blinding light and use several spells in the sun domain. It can purify all dead spirits in a 50-meter radius. It is the nemesis of such creatures. If the wearer is acknowledged by the ring, they will be enhanced. Otherwise, they will be weakened. The only problem is that if the wearer utilizes it too often, they will slowly become a believer of the eternal blazing sun and slowly defend the doctrines and praise the sun from the bottom of their hearts. If you wish to obtain it, then please pay me 9,000 in cash at once. I can wait for you to raise it. 9,000 pounds? Furs's mouth gaped open as though the other party was robbing her. This was a huge amount of wealth that she wouldn't be able to borrow, even if she asked someone to lend it to her. Aside from the deposit for the assassination of the Intis ambassador, the amount of money she had seen so far combined had never been this high. A person with 9,000 pounds in cash was considered a tycoon even in Backland. Although I know that mystical items are expensive, I never expected them to be this expensive. Does he plan on getting the 9,000 pounds and not participate in Beyonder gatherings anymore and leave the circle so as to enjoy life in peace? For a moment she didn't dare to reply to the seller. She pretended that nothing had happened and listened for nearly 10 minutes. But when she received no additional response to relatively inexpensive Beyonder weapons, she got up and went to the washroom. After confirming that no one was around, she closed the toilet door and sat down on the toilet. She recited Mr. Fool's honorable name, told him in prayer about what had just happened, and asked him to pass it on to the world. Klein, who had heard the layered, illusory sounds, quickly went above the endless gray fog and gained a basic understanding of the situation. 9,000 pounds? He mouthed the number, his expression twisting slightly. After silently calculating the amount of money he could raise in a short period of time, he let out a breath, conjured the fake person, the world, and manipulated him to give a response. The negative effect of this mystical item is too serious. I do not wish to be a believer of the sun. You don't have to worry about this anymore. We'll transact using cash instead. Pay 450 pounds and you'll get the formula for Trickmaster. The moment he finished his sentence, he cut the connection. Watching as the world disappeared, he raised his hand to rub his forehead and muttered to himself, "Next I'll have to see the information on what kind of items that barbarian lady can gather. Otherwise, I can only purchase that brooch from Eye of Wisdom." In the washroom, Furs let out a sigh of relief. She indicated that she would hold the sacrificial ritual as soon as she got back. It's a pity that I don't know the formula for now. Otherwise, I could take the opportunity to see if there are any Beyonder ingredients I need. She returned to the hall and focused on the information on the 2 blackboards. She didn't respond to the previous note, much less consider bargaining. Even if the seller was willing to discount it by 1,000 pounds, she wouldn't have the money or liquidity to buy it, and more importantly, she felt that Mr. World couldn't afford it either. She stayed until the end of the gathering, and because of Mr. A's changes, she didn't linger or talk to anyone. She quickly left the house. After more than 10 minutes, the gathering came to a complete end, leaving Mr. A and his attendants alone. Slowly, Mr. A got up and walked down the stairs to the basement. Suddenly, his knees buckled and he fell to the ground, rolling down several steps. He was sprawled on the ground, and the shadow beneath him quickly turned scarlet red. His flesh and blood melted and mixed into the shadow, making it look like a brand new, skinless, monster-like person that had been separated from his body. Gasp, gasp. Mr. A's breathing gradually returned to normal as his taut body gradually relaxed. The blood and flesh that had separated flowed back once again. Everything returned back to normal. Mr. A crawled forward and knelt in the basement, once again confessing his sins while choking with sobs. He was confessing for his oversight from before, that he wasn't vigilant enough and caused the Lord's descent to fail. City of Silver, Derek Berg's house. He walked in silence a few times around the table, unable to make up his mind. His reasoning told him that Mr. Hangman's suggestion was the best one, but the faces of the other members participating in the mission kept flashing in his mind, and he felt that he had abandoned and betrayed them by pretending to lose control. Is there no way to save them? Should I find a chance to meet with the chief and tell him that the half-destroyed temple belongs to the fallen creator, who's an evil god that controls the shepherd pathway? That he should be careful of Elder Lovia and change the person responsible for the mission. But how should I explain where I got this information from? In their eyes, Mr. Fool would be the same as an evil god. Derek pulled his hair in frustration. The axe of Hurricane was placed in a position that was within reach of his hands. Every time a bolt of lightning streaked past the window, it emitted a faint light. Suddenly, Derek stopped and looked out into the darkness and into the dark sky. It was as if he had once again seen the state his parents were in before their deaths. He found the pain he had experienced when he stabbed his sword downwards. There's no time. I need to make preparations for the future so that I wouldn't be suspected for my discovery of that god being the fallen creator. As his expression distorted, he clenched his teeth and muttered to himself. He then suddenly left the side of the window and went back to the table. He began practicing the light suppliance beyond her powers to drain his spirituality as quickly as possible. In the Hall family's luxurious villa. In an art studio, Audrey leisurely smeared oil paint when she heard a rhythmic knock on the door. When her maidservant Annie opened the door, she saw that it was her mother, Countess Caitlin. Although this lady was close to 50 years old, she looked to be in her early 30s. She had blonde hair, green eyes, and a beautiful and graceful appearance, enough to attract the attention of most gentlemen. "Mother, is something the matter?" Audrey put down the items in her hand and stood up, puzzled. The Countess looked at her daughter, who was even more beautiful than her younger self. She smiled and said, "I just attended a dinner party. Lady Della said that you're very interested in psychology and that you wanted to hire a tutor, didn't you?" "Yes, but I haven't decided yet," Audrey replied hesitantly on purpose, just like she usually did. How could the Countess not see through her daughter's thoughts? She smiled and said, "She recommended a psychiatrist named Escalante. If you have no problem with that, I'll send someone to invite her to tutor you twice a week. How about that? It's your decision." Audrey's smile blossomed bit by bit. "Mother, come and sit here. I'm lacking a beautiful model." On Tuesday morning, Klein confirmed through the Backlund Morning Post that Eye of Wisdom's gathering would be held tomorrow night. He was relieved as he was no longer worried that his acquisition of the items he needed wouldn't be in time for Miss Sharon's attack on the enemy. To celebrate the good news, he decided to take a day off at the Quellac Club. Underground shooting range of the Quellac Club. When he was done shooting, Klein meticulously serviced his free revolver and adjusted the ratio of purifying bullets, demon hunting bullets and exorcism bullets to 3:1:1. Phew. He exhaled, put away the revolver, tidied his coat and slowly walked back to the hall on the first floor. He had already heard from the attendant that the dish that was in limited supply today was pan-fried dragon bone fish. As soon as he entered the buffet cafeteria, Klein saw an acquaintance, Talon Dumont, the equestrian teacher from an abject noble family with short brown curls. He was eating his lunch with unfocused eyes. Klein carried his plate over, sat down and greeted him. Talon turned his head and glanced at him. His lips quivered a few times and after 3 or 4 seconds of silence he finally opened his mouth and mumbled, "Sherlock, do you know rare people who have strange abilities and are very powerful?" "Yes, the one in front of you is one." Klein's eyebrows twitched. He didn't give a direct answer. "What do you want to do?" Talon opened his mouth but said nothing. With a solemn expression, he thought for a while before he squeezed out a smile and said, "It's nothing. I was just asking out of curiosity." He had asked what should a person do if he fell in love with someone he shouldn't have the last time, and this time he's asking if I know of anyone with strange abilities. Is he trying to get rid of the other party and completely sever his friend's fantasies? Who's worth the risk? Hiring a killer is equivalent to murder. Klein mumbled silently, cut a piece of the fish without any fine bones and stuffed it into his mouth. Talon drew a breath, finished the food from his plate quickly and wiped his mouth with a napkin. He seemed to return to normal as he said with a smile, "Mike wants to hire you for a few days to be his bodyguard." "Mike Joseph? The reporter from the Daily Observer? I remember his performance at the Golden Rose was rather brilliant." Klein chuckled. What does Mike want to do now? Talon spread out his hands and said, I'm not sure. He just casually mentioned this matter. It seems to have something to do with an interview. He said that he will visit you the day after tomorrow. I hope you have the time to accept this commission. I can't be sure. Klein, who didn't know the details, didn't give an affirmative answer. At that moment he heard a series of illusory pleas from a woman. Miss Magician? Is she prepared to sacrifice the money in exchange for the formula? Klein picked up his speed and finished the rest of his food. Then he downed the black tea and went to the reception desk to get the attendant to open a lounge for him. After sealing the room with a wall of spirituality, he went above the gray fog and found that his judgment was correct. Miss Magician was requesting to hold the sacrificial ritual. The reason for her delay was that she only had £370 on her, and she had to go to the bank to withdraw some of her savings. After a series of maneuvering, she saw the £450 vanish into the illusionary door, and an additional formula appeared in her mind. Sequence 8. Trickmaster. Main ingredients: stomach pouch of a spirit eater, 20 milliliters of a deep-sea marlin's blood. Supplementary ingredients: 5 milliliters of essential oils made from hornbeam, 10 grams of string grass powder, a blossoming red chestnut flower, 80 milliliters of pure water. I've finally obtained it. It's been years. First couldn't help pacing back and forth, feeling overjoyed and proud. Then, not feeling at ease, she took out a pen and a piece of paper, recording down the formula so that she wouldn't forget it and end up having to trouble Mr. Fool. If I don't meet someone who doesn't know the market well, then the main ingredient is at least £300, and I only have £430 left. I still need to work hard to earn more money. I'm going to write a new book. First suddenly felt that she was brimming with motivation. She was no longer the procrastinator she had been before. 5 minutes to 8 on a Wednesday evening, carrying all his savings, Klein entered the house where the gathering organized by Eye of Wisdom was held. He was wearing a black robe with the hood over his face and an iron mask. £1,674 in cash and 5 gold coins. This is the new peak of my wealth. I wonder how much will remain after this gathering. Klein entered the living room and scanned the room with the help of the candle's flickering light. The apothecary didn't come. Is he caught up with something? Klein frowned slightly and sat in the same position as he did the previous time. After a few minutes, Eye of Wisdom clapped his hands and said, "Let's begin." Before he could finish his sentence, someone impatiently spoke up. It was the heavily shrouded lady who seemed to have an artisan backing her. She suppressed her voice and asked, "Is the friend who wanted to sell the Briber formula last time here?" "I'm here," Klein answered simply. The lady heaved a sigh of relief, pushed her iron mask down and said, "This time there's a Beyonder weapon that you need. Of course you can also choose cash." "What's the Beyonder weapon?" Klein suppressed the eagerness in his heart. The lady organized her words and said, "This is a whip woven from the feathers of the holy sunbird. You can usually disguise it as a belt. When used it will be covered with pure holy flames of light. Any undead monsters that are whipped by it will suffer great damage, and the weaker ones would even be directly obliterated. It can also be used to soak in liquids to create sun-holy water. But that would reduce the spirituality's durability. Every use will decrease its durability by a month. Currently, it has 13 months of effective durability. If you are willing, you can exchange it for the Briber formula without paying any additional cash." "Holy sunbird? It's not the sun divine bird. If it's the latter's feathers, I'll take it. Of course, only tail feathers would do. They can be used to concoct the Sequence 4's unshadowed potion." Klein was quite satisfied with the weapon itself, but the problem was that it could only be used for 13 months. Every time he made sun-holy water, the durability would be reduced by a month. In time he would have to replenish it with something similar. With this in mind, he turned to look at the seat of honor. "Mr. Eye of Wisdom, can you describe in detail the brooch you introduced last time?" "Oh, write it down on paper and indicate the price that would satisfy you." He was afraid that the others would be interested in the brooch and thus raise the price, so he decided at the last second to get Eye of Wisdom to write it down. "All right." Eye of Wisdom laughed and asked an attendant to bring him a pen and paper. While he was writing, the members of the gathering continued their trade. There were even some who were tempted as they asked about the price of the whip, only to receive an answer to wait. After a while, The Eye of Wisdom finished writing the introduction and passed it to Klein through the attendant. When Klein unrolled it, he saw that the words on the paper were written in print, preventing him from noticing anything special about them. Very careful. He started to read carefully. Sun brooch. It can also be called midsummer, and it is considered a relatively weaker grade 2 sealed artifact. With it acting as the center, it will fill a 10-meter radius with pure and warm energy. Normal people will not be able to sense it, but undead spirits and monsters will suffer constant damage, and they will quickly evaporate, like a pool of water under a blazing fireball. Even wraiths and shadows will suffer the same fate, albeit lasting a little longer. In such an environment, the strength of powerful undead creatures will be significantly weakened. It will be very difficult for the wearer to be possessed or corrupted by evil spirits or monsters. Allows use of spells such as Holy Light Summoning, Holy Water Creation, Fire of Light, Cleave of Purification, Horror Immunity, Holy Oath, and Sun Halo. The downside is that as long as you carry it, you will never be able to feel cool. You will always be experiencing a terrible heat. Young man, don't underestimate this state. The hot and irritated you will slowly step into the abyss of losing control. I will only sell it for £2,000. Don't try to bargain. As you know, I'm not too short of money and I'm a collector. It's much stronger than I imagined. Eye of Wisdom had been very vague the last time. Klein's heart skipped a beat. After a few seconds of thought, he looked over at the woman with the artisan backing her. £900 in cash. The average price for a Sequence 7 potion formula was around £800. Deal, the lady answered without hesitation. If I had known, I would have offered £1,000. Klein forced a smile. He was a man of his word, and without reneging his offer, he exchanged his prepared formula for £900 in cash. In an instant, his wealth soared to £2,574. It was enough to make a bachelor man live a pretty good life for the rest of his life. After Eye of Wisdom's appraisal, the lady looked at the formula once more in satisfaction. Sequence 7, Briber. Main ingredients: 1 weeping infant flower, strange-faced cannabis crystal. Supplementary ingredients: 5 drops of golden jimsonweed juice, 5 drops of black jimsonweed juice, 4 drops of fantasy grass essential oil, 80 milliliters of red wine. After completing the transaction, Klein drew a deep breath, looked at Eye of Wisdom and solemnly said, £2,000. I want that sun brooch. Eye of Wisdom chuckled and said, to be honest, I really don't wish to sell it, but since I have 2-081, sun brooch isn't necessary to me. Besides, I have already named my price and reneging isn't my style. Wait 3 minutes for me. I'll get the sun brooch. All right, Klein replied, feeling both expectant and also feeling the pinch. At this point, the Beyonders in the activity room cast their gazes on him. A deal of £2,000 rarely appeared at this level of ordinary gatherings, perhaps not even once in a year or two. Klein could feel the greed and covetous feelings in their eyes. After a short silence, the transactions continued until Eye of Wisdom returned. In his open palm lay a dark golden brooch shaped like a sunbird. It was obvious that the Eye of Wisdom had some sweat on his face. You can confirm it before you pay. The hooded Eye of Wisdom walked directly to Klein and handed the dark golden brooch to him. Very generous. Klein reached out to take it, but before he could examine it closely, he felt his surroundings become very hot. Even the wind felt as if it had been ignited. Once it entered his nose, it would spread to his lungs. At this moment he seemed to have left the cold and humid backland, finding himself in the desert and wilderness, right in the middle of the northern continent. Hanging above him was the sun that radiated endless light and heat, and in his surroundings was the extremely dry and boundless yellow sand. Phew, it makes me want to eat ice cream. Sweat slowly seeped out of Klein's forehead, but under the iron mask the liquid couldn't fall freely. It could only stick on the spot. Through direct contact he could feel the pure and warm power radiating out, but the Beyonders around him were not affected in the slightest. After fixing the brooch in place, Klein released his spirituality and infused it into the dark golden surface. With a boom, he saw the sky filled with dancing dots of pure gold light as he received a great deal of information. This included how to use some of the spells in the sun domain with the help of the brooch. Most important of all were the tricks to injecting spirituality and the corresponding activation incantations. One of them included providing the brooch with 2 seconds of spirituality, allowing it to summon a holy beam of light that descended from the sky to purify the undead and inflict certain damage on other targets. A continuous supply of spirituality for 5 seconds, together with the use of the word sun in ancient Hermes, would create a small amount of sun-holy water, which would exorcise evil spirits, drive away the cold and purify wraiths. In addition to the difference between strength and time intervals, the other corresponding spells could be cast as well. Fire of Light was a sacred concentrated flame that suddenly appeared out of thin air via a mere thought. Cleave of Purification was an effective attack against wraiths, and it could also be used to augment bullets. Horror Immunity allowed the wearer to no longer feel fear. Holy Oath was used to temporarily strengthen one's strength, agility, fire damage, and holy damage via chanting the corresponding ancient Hermes term. Sun Halo targeted comrades who were within 20 meters of him. It could effectively boost their courage and purify the evil energies within their bodies. Not bad. Other than not being strange enough, it doesn't have too many flaws. Complements my magician abilities nicely. It's just a little hot. Klein's mind was filled with fantasies about himself in short-sleeved clothes. He rolled up his robe, took out a stack of bills from his inside pocket. Together with the 900 pounds he had just received from the lady with the artisan backing her, he counted 2,000 pounds in cash before handing it to Eye of Wisdom's attendant. After counting thrice and finally confirming that there was no mistake, Klein looked at his rapidly shrinking wallet, feeling both happy and sad at the same time. The money he had painstakingly saved had been reduced to 574 pounds and 5 gold coins. However, he also obtained his second mystical item. The number of side effects was obviously fewer than the master key. It was a mystical item which was more outstanding, the sun brooch. The only drawback is it's just too hot. Klein reached out and touched his iron mask, and he nearly took it off to start using it to fan himself. With the reduction of his funds, Klein stopped considering the notion of purchasing anything else. He just sat there quietly listening until the end of the gathering. Stimulated by the massive deal of 2,000 pounds, the gathering that night was relatively lively. For example, the whip woven from the feathers of the holy sunbird was sold for 850 pounds. Eye of Wisdom also made several purchases, buying an ancient book and a Beyonder ingredient. When the gathering ended, Eye of Wisdom surveyed the room and looked at Klein. He said with a chuckle, "You shall be the first to leave. Is he afraid that someone will rob me?" Klein thanked him sincerely and walked out of the living room under the guidance of the attendant. He then impatiently took off his hooded robe and iron mask. He had already tried to use his spirituality to wrap and seal the sun brooch. It prevented it from constantly purifying the surroundings and prevented its existence from being discovered by other Beyonders. However, the negative effects couldn't be weakened, unless it was not on his person. In order to ensure my mental health, I should only use it only when necessary. I can usually rely on purifying bullets and exorcism bullets. Klein left the gathering venue and took a long detour before arriving outside the Bravehearts bar. He entered, circled the area and quickly came out again and hired a carriage. Unsurprisingly, he quickly saw a figure in a black regal dress outline itself opposite him. Sharon's appearance had not changed at all. She asked in an ethereal voice, "Are you done with your preparations?" "Yes, you can choose the ambush location and time. Notify me once you have confirmed the details." Klein nodded calmly. Sharon looked at him and said, "Okay." Seeing that she was about to disappear, Klein added, "Have Caspers prepare a box of explosives and bury them all over the planned battlefield." Sharon was silent for 2 seconds before she said, "Steve is also a demolition expert." "No, my main purpose is not to blast anyone apart." Klein smiled. "I just want to put on some fireworks." Sharon stared at him for a few seconds, then she nodded. Witnessing her figure fading rapidly, Klein leaned back against the wall and opened the window, letting the bone-piercing wind in, but he still felt hot. "Back on Earth, I hated summer the most. I like ice pops, ice cream, cold drinks, watermelons." As he mumbled, Klein reached into his pocket and held the sun brooch. "This is a mystical item worth 2,000 pounds. Returning to Minsk Street, Klein walked slowly along the road lined with trees to Unit 15. When he passed Lawyer Jurgen's house, he subconsciously looked inside and saw the gas lamp with a slightly blue glow. "There's someone home." Klein laughed as he sighed, his forehead constantly beaded with sweat. Early the next day on a Thursday morning, Klein had just come out of the bathroom with a newspaper in hand when he heard the doorbell ring. Who is it? Right, Talon mentioned that reporter Mike Joseph will be coming to me today. Amid the tinkling bells, Klein came to the door and reached for the handle. The image of the visitor naturally appeared in his mind. He was about 30 years old with a black tweed coat and a matching half-top hat. He had sparse eyebrows, charming blue eyes and a handsome mustache. But his skin was rather rough. He was none other than the reporter from the Daily Observer, Mike Joseph. Good morning, Mike. Talon told me about you. Klein opened the door and greeted him. He hadn't hesitated to throw the sun brooch above the gray fog. Mike Joseph pulled his bow tie and said, "Sorry for disturbing you so early, but I have matters to deal with later." "I understand," Klein said politely. "Have you had breakfast? Would you like to try my toast?" Mike suddenly smiled. "I'm so sorry, that would be so nice of you. If it's possible, could I also have a cup of hot coffee? Milk would do too. I noticed that you ordered fresh milk." "All right." Klein smiled in response. He busied himself with the toast, poured the milk, took out a tin of butter and sat down eating without a word. Across from him, Mike was enjoying his breakfast without restraint, oblivious to the silence. "Phew." Klein exhaled and put down his cup. "Mike, you wanted to hire me to protect you?" Mike set his knife and fork down slowly and took a mouthful of milk. "Yes, about 2 days, Friday and Saturday, maybe even Sunday morning." "Who wants to hurt you?" Klein asked in deliberation. Mike chuckled and said, "No, this is just a form of proactive self-protection. The editor of the newspaper arranged for me to do an investigation in East Borough, the dock area and the factory district. It's said that it's sponsored by some church or aristocrat. As you know, gangs run rampant in East Borough. There are thugs everywhere and there are people who are willing to betray their conscience just to scrounge a meal. I need a bodyguard who is good at fighting and shooting. And most private detectives have certain connections in East Borough, don't they? I don't. I rely on metaphysics to crack cases, no deduction." Klein thought for a moment and said, "But I might not have the time in the next few days. I have to see when Miss Sharon will be taking action." Mike cleared his throat and said, "I've already applied for £10. This protection mission will amount to £10, even if nothing happens." Klein let out a soft chuckle. "Mike, I'm serious. Tomorrow at this time, come after breakfast to look for me. If I have availed myself, I will take this commission. If I'm really busy, then I will introduce you to other detectives. They're also good at fighting and shooting. For example, Stewart or Kaslana." 2 names flashed through his mind. Mike finished the remaining toast and said, "That wouldn't be an issue." After breakfast, Klein watched the journalist leave his home and admired the sights of the freezing rain outside through the oriel window, the passing carriages and pedestrians, the dark sky and the colorful umbrellas. Finally, a normal mission. It neither involves Beyonders nor does it have anything to do with finding cats and catching adulterers. It's a pity that it isn't a commission regarding a murder case or something like that. Otherwise, I would be able to experience what it feels like to be a true detective. There is always only one truth. Klein's thoughts wandered aimlessly as he felt an inexplicable sense of carefreeness. If not for the fact that he was still worried about the situation regarding Sharon and Merrick, he planned to relax completely, visit all kinds of museums, buy a ticket to a large theater, listen to a few operas and musicals, and enjoy the delicacies of the various nations that had gathered in Backlund City. "Well, I'm a casual tourist, a lonely gourmet." Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh, turned around and walked towards the sofa, intending to look through the newspapers he hadn't finished reading. Suddenly, he noticed that a slip of paper had appeared on the coffee table. The handwriting was elegant and reserved. "Tonight at 10 o'clock. We'll meet at the back door of Braveheart's bar." Klein was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look outside the window side and said, "Is it finally starting?"